You're listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway. Only on Sputnik Radio.
Welcome to the mother of all talk shows, the Open University of the Airwaves, the College of Knowledge, with 1 million viewers a week and untold listeners too. Donald Trump gets banned by that paragon of virtue, Sir Nick Clegg, David Cameron's former Deputy Prime Minister. He's banned for another 2 years, whilst George Bush, the mass murderer, is hugged like a teddy bear by the Liberal establishment. They said that anybody but Corbyn would be 20 points ahead of Boris Johnson. Keir Starmer is 16 points behind, and twice as many working class people prefer Johnson to the wooden top Sir Keir. We'll be asking later if it's not time for Keir to go. We'll be talking about the United States media and the British media and the third wave of the coronavirus. Perhaps above all, we'll be talking to Tel Aviv and Gaza about what happens next, and it's already heating up right now. This is the mother of all talk shows.
Radio Sputnik. We speak your language.
The mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway.
This is Radio Sputnik.
Not only have we got 1 million viewers and untold listeners, my YouTube channel just passed 100,000 subscribers. Apparently I get some kind of plaque and some kind of earnings. So please do watch on my YouTube channel, and if you haven't yet subscribed to it, please do. If you're watching us on Facebook, either my own Facebook page or RT's multiple Facebook pages, please share right now with all your friends and contacts. You can also watch on Twitter. A surprisingly large number of you are watching on your telephone. Some are even watching on Instagram, filmed by my good wife, about whom more later. And you can watch on Twitch. You can watch on my Telegram channel. I forget what the name of it is, but you'll find it easily enough. It's t.me/George Galloway. There you go. Now, as I said earlier, that paragon of virtue, Sir Nick Clegg, has decided for us who we can see on social media. We can see everyone of whom he approves, but we cannot see Donald Trump. Personally, I think it's all gone rather boring over in the United States. Certainly on social media, I want to see what the orange man is saying, but Sir Nick has decided otherwise. You couldn't make it up, especially in the context that George W. Bush is literally being hugged and kissed like an old stuffed teddy bear, particularly by the Liberal establishment. Hey, he only killed 1 million people. Mission accomplished, George. But he didn't say mean and ugly things on social media. Perhaps because he doesn't know how to work a mobile telephone. He was once found trying to put coins in the top of his mobile telephone. George Bush, now a Liberal hero. Donald Trump, a non-person. Do you remember what they used to say about non-persons in the Soviet Union? Remember what some of them even said about the banning orders on the likes of Winnie Mandela during the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa. Well, Donald Trump is now a non-person. We'll be asking the coolest of American cats, Garland Nixon, in the course of the show, whether that will help or hinder Donald Trump. If I were him, indeed if I were anybody, if I were Russia, if I were China, I'd be putting a lot of effort and money into building alternative social media platforms to the dictatorship of Sir Nick Clegg. Wouldn't you? And we'll be talking, as I said, about Sir Keir Starmer. They said the Blairites, he's back, by the way, Tony Blair. Did you see that? He's now laying out the future for Britain post-COVID-19. He said that we ought to be discriminatory against those that have not been vaccinated, that people who have been vaccinated should have more rights than people who have not been vaccinated. But hey, it's a voluntary vaccination, don't you know? You'll just be officially, legally discriminated against if you haven't been. That would be a bit of a nightmare to administer in your local Wetherspoons, don't you think? But anyway, people say Tony Blair's going to come back and take over the Labour Party. But why would he need to? He's already controlling the Labour Party. The block of wood called Keir Starmer that leads the Labour Party does exactly what his master's voice tells him to do, both on domestic policy and on international policy. You may have seen a rather large article in the Sunday Times today, adorned in part by my picture. It's the best article I've ever had in the Sunday Times, at least since Andrew Neil was the editor and published a double-page spread of mine from Eritrea and Ethiopia. And that was 40 years ago. So it's an interesting story, but it makes the point that Labour has lost one brick after another from its formerly impregnable red wall, and maybe about to lose another, the Muslim brick in the red wall. After all, why would any Muslim support Keir Starmer? Why? Keir Starmer has publicly declared himself as the chief shill of Israel in British politics. He's expelled Jeremy Corbyn from the Labour Party over that issue. He has ruthlessly expunged all trace of support for the Palestinian people from the Labour Party's ranks. If you don't believe me and you're in the Labour Party, tweet right now that Israel is an apartheid state, which is something that many of the greatest Israelis openly write in their newspapers every day. But if you're in the Labour Party in Britain and you say it, you will promptly be expelled. That means that the late Mr. Benn would have had to be expelled. Ken Livingstone already has been expelled. I've been expelled. Jeremy Corbyn has been expelled. Chris Williamson, an indefatigable campaigner for Palestine, he's been expelled. Why would anybody that supports the Palestinians support Labour? And that is what the Sunday Times is saying. Having lost the working class with their absolutely obvious detestation of the things that the British working class believe in, how they live their lives, how they use their language, what television they like, what newspapers they like, having lost the working class and not actually being entirely woke enough to hold on to confidently the metropolitan commentariat and literati, the Labour Party is like a cork adrift on the ocean. It doesn't know where it's going. It's not in control of where it's going, as you're going to see again in the North in the next few weeks. So we'll be asking, of course, where does Labour go after Keir Starmer? Because trust me on this, Keir Starmer will shortly be no more. Do they go further towards the Blairites, or do they move backwards to the Burnhamites? There you are, I've just coined a phrase. Andy Burnham, the elected mayor of Greater Manchester, suffers the considerable disadvantage of not having a seat in Parliament, but somebody could stand down and create a by-election. Wouldn't that be a good thing? And let him in, they hope. So any number of things can happen in Labour, and we'll be talking about them. The third wave of the coronavirus is apparently upon us. It's called the, is it the Delta variant now? It used to be called the Indian variant, but that was adjudged to be not politically correct. On the subject of politically correct, because I've got a bit of land now, I switched on the Archers this morning, try and get some agricultural tips. There's everything in the Archers now except agriculture. They'll be closing down the farm and turning it into a vegan cafe before very long. There was every piece of wokery, right down to a campaign against plastics and a bout of alcoholism, just to top it up. But on the subject of wokery, where was I? What was I talking about? The situation that we now have in the British media is perfectly absurd. And the scene is set for Andrew Neil, the aforementioned, and his GB News, which starts next week, I think to inflict devastating damage on the BBC's audience, and on Sky for that matter, but particularly on the BBC. The BBC, especially Radio 4, has turned into a festival of wokery. Right after the hour of the Archers wokery, the opening statement on Desert Island Discs could have been actually a political broadcast, propaganda. That's all it was. Introducing a woman judge as if she was a hater of men, who turned out to be actually a very fine woman. I could see why they were building her up, because she's about to chair, as the coroner, the inquest into poor Dawn Sturgis, the woman who was killed in Salisbury from a perfume bottle, which her partner retrieved from her from a charity bin some weeks after the attack on the Skripals. Curious, that story. Anyway, maybe this fine woman judge will get to the bottom of it in the inquest that she will shortly begin. But the BBC is uniquely vulnerable to Andrew Neil, because millions of people in Britain have decided that the BBC hates them, hates how they vote, hates how they think, hates how they live their lives. We'll see. Perhaps we'll have a media expert on next week about that. This week I'll be asking Patrick Christys about it too. We'll be talking to Moats medic, Dr. Ranjeet Brar, on the third wave of the coronavirus. We'll be asking him what's going to happen to all these poor people that went to the Algarve when it was on the green list, but are now marooned there, that it's on the amber list, and are going to have to quarantine when they come back to the United Kingdom. We'll be asking Dr. Brar what is likely to happen on the 21st of June. Is it Freedom Day? Are we returning to normal? Or will the U-turn that we've seen before be executed again? And we'll be talking to the greatest living Israeli, Gideon Levy, the author and journalist on the Haaretz newspaper in Israel, who spoke to us just a couple of weeks ago during the savage bombardment and mass murder, half of the victims being women and children. Half, exactly, half. Not militants, not terrorists, not fighters, not soldiers. Half of those murdered were women and children. And you may recall that the great Gideon Levy said to me that Netanyahu going won't make any difference because the problem is not Netanyahu. Well, we're going to quickly find out if he was right, because Netanyahu is out. Or is he out? Ha ha! You know he's come back before. But we'll be asking Gideon, what happens if he is out? Who are the people who are then coming in? And we'll be talking to the brave Palestinian nurse, Nour Alshaer, who the last time we spoke to her was in her basement as all around her Israeli bombs and rockets fell. One last word on the Middle East. 2 friends of mine were arrested in the last 24 hours in Jerusalem. I have been telling you for a decade that the real heart of the Palestinian matter is not in Gaza, but in Jerusalem, and moreover, in the holy places in Jerusalem. But the area around the old city, which is called the Sheikh Jarrah area, is home to thousands of the remaining Palestinians in the old city of Jerusalem. And the settlers are trying to destroy their houses and replace them with more illegal settlements. 2 women, both friends of mine, or in one case her family, her father is a friend of mine, were arrested. But the one who is personally a friend of mine is the well-named Guevara Boderi, called after Che Guevara himself. She's the brave, intrepid Al Jazeera correspondent in Jerusalem. She was grabbed whilst filming what's happening in the Sheikh Jarrah area, and her hand broken by the brutes of the Israeli occupation force. She was taken to prison for filming what was happening for the news on Al Jazeera, where she was kept in the baking heat and not allowed to take off her journalist's flak jacket. She's now been released. Her arm is in a sling, but she's been released only on the condition that she does not do any more reporting in Sheikh Jarrah for the next 16 days. The logic of that, go figure. Maybe they hope the story will go away in the next 16 days. I assure them it will not, and neither will the well-named Guevara Boderi. But the other woman, Nour Alshaer, is the daughter of a friend of mine in Jerusalem. Nabil Alshaer was sitting outside the police station while both his daughter and his son were inside. They were inside because they film with their mobile phone what is actually happening in the Sheikh Jarrah area of Jerusalem. And they put it out to the world. No more than that. No stone throwing, no weapons, just a mobile phone filming what's happening. Now, Mona has been released in the last hour or two, but her brother is still, as far as I know, behind bars. So if the intention was to somehow cut off the supply of news and information from the ethnic cleansing going on in Jerusalem, I assure those responsible for it that it will fail, at least as long as the mother of all talk shows still has breath. Now, here's the first poll. Should Trump's social media ban have been extended for another 2 years? You can vote right now on my Twitter feed. And here's the first question. On this day in 1940, who wrote in their diary, invaded Normandy, left Portsmouth 10:30? Was it A, General Eisenhower, B, Lord Lovett, or C, General Montgomery? I'll be right back after a short break. Stay with us.
Radio Sputnik.
Hello, ministers. Welcome to the government media training day. Is everybody here? Yes. Incorrect. You must never give a yes or no answer. Understood? I don't understand what's going on.
Sorry, sir. Why can't we answer yes or no?
A very sensible question. I'm glad that you've asked it, and I can see why you think that, but that's not how we do things at the moment. See? That's how it's done. Who's that I can hear sniffling? Hancock? Glad. Ah, I see you've been practicing. Somebody go and get him someone to blow his nose on. If somebody asks you your opinion, remember, you don't have one. And no matter how simple the question is, never answer yes or no. Got it? Glad.
Tough questions are the most powerful weapon we have. As long as you have questions, we'll keep asking. Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
In 1944, it was a very auspicious day. 4,000 men from the United States Armed Forces, the Canadian Armed Forces, other Commonwealth forces, and of course the Great British Army invaded Normandy. 4,000 of them were killed on the beaches, 10,000 of them maimed, wounded, many of them for the rest of their lives. But they established a foothold and the liberation of the western part of Europe began. It was one of the greatest days in our history, and it should have been commemorated right at the top of the news by everyone, but it was not. Anyway, here was the question. On this day in 1944, who wrote in their diary, with remarkable British understatement, invaded Normandy, left Portsmouth 10:30. Was it A, General Eisenhower, B, Lord Lovett? No, it was C, General Bernard Montgomery. That is the correct answer. Let me give you the phone numbers, by the way. I didn't give them earlier. Here are the phone numbers. If you're calling from the United Kingdom, remember, it's completely free. It's 08081 965522. 08081 965522. And if you're in the United States, it's toll-free, as they call it there. It still costs you nothing. It's +1 844 944 3344. That's +1 844 944 3344. You can email the show, by the way, anytime at onair@moats.tv. Oh, look, I've got poll numbers. Should Trump's social media ban have been extended for another 2 years? Wow, look at those numbers. Yes, 11%. No, 82%. Ban him forever? 7%. 900 people voted already. That is a fascinating number. It's roughly in line with my opening remarks, but I ain't no Trumper, bruv. Now, the brave nurse, Nour Alshaer, the last time we spoke to her, she didn't know if she was going to make it through the night. I'm glad to say that she did. We've tried to stay in touch with her, and with a bit of luck, we'll be connected right now. Nour, are you there?
Yes, hi.
By the grace of God, it's wonderful to see you again. Just paint for us a picture of what it's like immediately after the storm.
Yeah, basically right now, we're at the time where we actually can start counting our losses and think about all the people we lost because we before did not have the chance, like we didn't have the privilege to grieve our losses. Like, you know, my cousin died and we couldn't even give her the funeral. So we started giving people funerals they deserved. We started rebuilding the Gaza Strip. We started sweeping floors or in the grounds and putting rocks away and having tents for people who lost their houses, people who don't have homes. Right now, like, we're helping them live with us until like we rebuild the Gaza Strip. So it is a mix of sadness and grief, but also a lot of resilience and strength of the people of the Gaza Strip who actually survived extremely terrible times, but now made it, and we're glad we did.
We'll come back to that for sure. If you don't mind me saying, and if you don't mind explaining, what were the circumstances in which your cousin was killed?
Right. So basically, we heard a very loud bombing nearby. Like, we made some sort of like algorithm about like depending on the loudness of the bomb. So if it's like too loud, that means that this is our same street's bomb, right? Like the bombing happened in our same street. Like a little less loud, that means the same neighborhood, like something like that, right? So that was like really loud. So we knew it was like our neighborhood loud bombing, but we didn't know where it was until like 20 minutes later, because obviously we have to wait on the media, and the media means journalists, and journalists means people who are not safe leaving their houses, trying to report what's happening on the rest of their lives. So it took him like that time, and then we saw pictures posted on them by Al-Najjar hospital. They were in pieces, but we knew it was them because it was their house that was bombed. And at the same time, another bombing happened in our same neighborhood as well, bombing another family, one of whom is my other cousin. She's still injured. She's still in critical conditions, but her husband and her child died, and other members of her family as well. So it was like a whole massacre that happened in our neighborhood. We made it safe, we made it live, but my cousins didn't.
It's just kismet that you made it through. Your cousin presumably was not any kind of legitimate target, even by the standards of the Israeli military. Can you hear me, Nour?
Yeah, can you repeat that? Sorry.
Yeah, it's just destiny, nasib, kismet, that you and your family were not in pieces. Instead, it was your cousin. Your cousin was presumably not any kind of legitimate target.
1000%, because Israel keeps claiming that their targets are all like, terrorist targets. But I know for a fact that my cousin was not one of those targets. So they were talking about like all these headquarters, like neither of my cousins was that, not even her child, Nour Alshaer. She 100% was not one of those terrorist targets. So yes, it is definitely a qisma and nasib that we made it alive, but it didn't feel like we were going to any second during those 11 days. Like, we were prepared to die every single second. And another counter argument, but like their claims about how they're only targeting terrorists, is the fact that right now a lot of injured civilians after the attacks are waiting on the border, the Israeli border, to go like to hospitals in Jerusalem, the West Bank, to get treatment, and they're denied the permit. Well, if you mistakenly, if Israel mistakenly bombed them, and they only meant to terrorist some terrorist groups, then why not and even allow them have treatment, right? Like, why not allow them just make it alive through, like, after they're badly injured? Like, why also let them die now that you know that they're civilians and Israel bombed them?
A very powerful point. So to sum up that part, one of your cousins was killed. The other cousin is in a critical condition, but her husband and children are dead. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay.
That is correct.
Now,
and my pregnant cousin's child was also killed. Sure.
By the grace of God, more Palestinian children will have been born since then than Palestinians who were killed. So What exactly has Israel gained from this murderous attack? Nour?
Well, at the beginning, it was some political game for Netanyahu to win some popular. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry, my Wi-Fi is not too stable.
It's a wonder we've got
Okay.
it all.
Yeah, so at the beginning, the reason why
Go on, Nour. Just
Can you hear me?
ignore me. Yeah, just keep talking.
Okay. So at the beginning, it started a political game by Netanyahu because he wanted to win some popular votes, starting the whole thing in Sheikh Jarrah and, winning some approval by the settlers who wanted to live in Sheikh Jarrah. And then it came at us in Gaza. So at the end, Israel just won, I don't know, killing children. Right, because right now, Netanyahu is kicked out from the position, so he didn't make it he didn't make his wishes of staying in position. But now, what they did and what they won is destroying the infrastructure of the people in the Gaza Strip, making the blockade even harder. Now they're imposing more punishments on us in Gaza for surviving, because survived the attacks on the Gaza Strip, so now we're being more punished. Now the border is closed more than ever, and we can't depend on factories or anything for that matter for our economy. And now after most of our infrastructure is destroyed, so we depend on agriculture. They're not allowing the export of our corpses either. So the winning is just making life even more tough and harder for the survivors of the attacks.
Now, the tactic of the German Air Force in the Blitz of Britain in 1940, indeed throughout the war, but especially in 1940 and 41, was that it would break the civilian population's determination to continue to resist. This completely failed in Britain. The people actually became more determined to resist and cleaved to their government and their country the more the bombs fell. Was it something similar in the response of the people in Gaza? Have they actually become more determined rather than less? Nour? I think that
100.
we may have lost our Nour. Are you back? I'm afraid the line to Gaza has gone, but I hope that you actually gathered enough, more than enough actually, from that interview to get a picture of what happens when the Israeli war machine attacks military targets in the highly urbanized and most densely populated piece of land, not more than 21 miles long and not more than a few miles across, in which 2 million people are locked up so that people can shoot them like fish in a barrel. But they were not fish. They were Nour's cousin. They were Nour's cousins and the husband and children of one of them. I thought that was extraordinarily powerful. Let me read some social media. Adam says, things that are unstoppable. Black Lives Matter, Palestinian rights, trans rights, Scottish indie. Get on the other three-quarter winning team, George. I will never support the breakup of Britain. I have opposed it all of my life, Adam. And something you need to know, I oppose the breakup of all countries. I oppose the breakup of Cyprus. I opposed the breakup of Yugoslavia. I opposed the breakup even of the USSR. I don't believe in breaking up countries. The people of Liverpool will never be foreigners to me, Adam, no matter how hard you try. The people of Newcastle, of Carlisle, of Middlesbrough, of Birmingham, of London, of Bristol will never be foreigners to me, Adam. So you can put your indie where the sun don't shine. And Ima says no one should be censored on social media except for obvious behavior, threatening, etc. Emily says perhaps the people of Gaza ought to demand that their political leadership stop firing rockets at innocent civilian population centres. Emily, here's my number. It's 08081 965522. Let me read it to you again, Emily. 08081 965522. I really would like you to call Emily and let's have that matter out once and for all. Come and have a go, Emily, if you think you're hard enough. And Ashley says, George Galloway, please talk about Denmark spying on Merkel, Macron, and everyone else for the US, which continues until now. As a matter of fact, Ashley, I spoke about it twice last week on Manila Chan's In Question on RT America, and you can find that right now, or after the show at least, on YouTube. And GDNPB says, free speech overrated. We should all know it will not stop with Trump. Emily again says, I, for one, am rather gratified that Trump is not allowed to have a platform. He is rather crude, and he inspires the politically unsophisticated to embrace horrendous ideas and even violence. My, Emily, as adjudged by you or me or Sir Nick Clegg, who will guard the guards? And when, Emily, will you be banned? And Shabir says, in any case, it was the Yanks who are ultimately responsible for spreading the virus and blaming the Chinese. I don't know what you mean by that. Michael says, George, please let us all know, what is your opinion about the now taken very seriously appearing extraterrestrial phenomenon that is now making a stand in the human psyche? I think we dealt with that last week. It was very interesting. Watch the show. And Strata says, Anthony Fauci is saying you need to wear your mask over your eyes to cover up his emails. Very clever. And JB says, talk about the Fauci emails, George. Show him to be lying all along and part of a cover-up. Well, I will be talking to Garland Nixon, and I'm sure that that matter is going to come up. Garland is on at 9 o'clock. How's the poll doing? More than 1,000 have voted. 10% of you think Trump's social media ban should have been extended for another 2 years. 82% of you think no, it should not. Ban him forever? 8%. So 18% wanted him banned forever or at least for another 2 years, and 82% are against it. The Telegram poll result is very similar, almost exactly the same. 12% yes, 81% no, 7% ban him forever. Now, second question. Which soon-to-be famous author landed on D-Day with the chapters of his first novel in his pack? A. Evelyn Waugh, B. Norman Mailer, C. J.D. Salinger. Well, I would have got that one wrong. Let's see if you would have. So, let me get a quick break and then followed by Dr. Ranjeet Brar, the Moats medic on COVID-19. Stay tuned.
Radio Sputnik.
In a media landscape filled with so-called journalists acting as stenographers for their billionaire bosses, there is a desperate need for news, analysis, and perspectives that buck the status quo and get to the heart of how domestic and international events impact you and me, as well as showing how we can get involved in the struggle to change that status quo. Check out By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik, Monday through Friday from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, to hear the stories and voices that mainstream media refuses to tell you. And join us as we connect the political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us. That's By Any Means Necessary, Monday through Friday at 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on Radio Sputnik.
Pizza Express Woking. What is it you want? Oh, you want an ill-advised interview on the BBC? A cheese pizza, extra immature, and a raw bailout. No, we don't take taxpayers' money. Yeah, but we do take contactless. Would you like a receipt for that, Mr. Prince?
The mother of all talk shows. Join our faculty of legends, contributors, and callers. Everyone is welcome.
Well, the question was, which soon-to-be famous author landed on D-Day with chapters of his first novel in his pack? Was it A, Evelyn Waugh, B, Norman Mailer, which I certainly would have plumped for, or C, J.D. Salinger? And it was indeed J.D. Salinger. I would have got that one wrong. Let me know if you did. Now, Dr. Ranjeet Brar is with us from the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. He's had a rest over the last couple of weeks, but we had to bring him back tonight because there are developments in this story, and I'm glad to say that he joins us now. Dr. Ranjeet, welcome back. Always a pleasure to see you. Are we in a third wave? Is the Delta variant, formerly known as the Indian variant, a real and present danger to the June 21st Freedom Day, in your view?
George, thanks for having me back. Good to be with you. Sorry to be discussing this once again. I think yes and no. The Indian variant clearly is real. It's caused a lot of chaos in India. And what we've seen throughout the pandemic is anywhere that the virus really runs rampant out of control, we're likely to see the emerging of a slight variant strain. There are, as we've said many times, more than 4,000 variants. But this India variant, the Delta variant, B1617.2, does now seem to be responsible for around 60% of new infections in Britain. So it's become the dominant variant here. But before getting carried away with that fact, I think it's really important to examine three questions. One is, is it more infectious? Is it more dangerous? And, to what extent does it have resistance to vaccinations? And what we seem to be seeing is that, it is slightly more infectious. There are variations on exactly how much, but a little bit. Is it more serious? Difficult to say. There's only very mild evidence to suggest it's in any way more serious clinically. Slightly higher rates of hospitalization seem to be seen with it, but those are overall still very low. And in terms of resistance to the vaccine, we know the South Africa variant, the now called Beta variant, B1351, was the variant most resistant to the AstraZeneca vaccine in particular. And it does seem that this India variant has some of those features. However, if we look overall at the statistics, hospitalizations in this country at the moment are at an all-time low. Much less than 1% of people in our hospitals have COVID. There are slight increase in the cases to about 30,000 a week, but deaths again are at an all-time low since the very start of the pandemic. So, personally, Intermittent Sage, who I have a lot of time for and respect for, obviously a very august and expert body of opinion, think that we should be sounding alarm. And they in particular point out that we should do our best to still have in place excellent healthcare measures of, isolation and support packages of isolation for those who have found to have this variant, so that we can stop it from spreading. But still, it's likely to be the case that people who have vaccination are essentially immune. And so what I think we have done, remember right at the beginning, there was a lobby of opinion who said we need to let the virus run through the population and protect the elderly. Now, we couldn't protect the elderly. That was the fault in that scenario. But now, effectively, through the vaccination program, I believe that they are really protected, and that we have effectively uncoupled the spread of the vaccine through the remaining population who are able to get it from those worst effects of hospitalizations and deaths. Of course, we'll have to see in reality whether that's the case. But my personal feeling is this is not a third wave of the kind of magnitude that we saw in other countries, or indeed with our second wave here, George.
So if you were the health minister, and I so wish you were, would you be going full speed ahead on the 21st of this month, or would you retain some of the restrictions?
I personally would ease the restrictions, but equally, it needs a careful process of monitoring and vigilance. I do think it's a real problem, and we should be testing and isolating people who have that variant, supporting those who are economically most marginalized so that they can do that to stop its spread. But absolutely, I would personally continue as we currently are with easing of restrictions, George.
Now, let me ask you, if I may, taking advantage of your being here, it's a different subject. I read somewhere that in a matter of days from now, the NHS is going to sell all of our data and details. What could you tell us about that?
That is actually true, George. So on the 21st, the NHS data, all data taken from the time of your birth records, right up until the time of your death, and that would include maternity data, includes data of your mental health, data of your sexual health, data of your sexual preferences. So all kinds of extremely sensitive data that really you would only share with your GP on the basis that they're going to use it, or health professional on the basis they're going to use it to help to treat you, has become a valuable commodity and resource for a couple of reasons. One, for research, and that's how we're being encouraged to think about it. But there's another emerging threat, which is that, increasingly, as waiting lists increase, before the pandemic, waiting lists were already at an all-time high. Coming out of the pandemic, we know that waiting lists are about 5 million people in our country waiting for operations. And the president of the Royal College of Surgeons weighed into this debate this week in a slightly unhelpful way, I think. He said, look, if people come back to the NHS as they're doing, there's going to soon be 10 million people on the waiting list. And he said we need a radical solution. We need to think like grown-ups about this. And he pointed at increasing specialization and separation of surgical services on the one hand, and to carry on with our relationship with the private sector, where we've been giving away actually tens of billions of pounds to the private sector to subsidize them during this time. Now, the private sector themselves say the largest and most profitable section of healthcare, which is growing at the moment, is the self-paying sector. And you can see those things are directly linked. If there are 10 million people waiting for operations, and some of them may be relatively routine, but many of them will be life-changing, and some of them will be life-saving operations. And if you're waiting for those and you simply think, well, whatever I've got, my health is the most important thing, I just need to get around this incredible wait, no matter how much you might support the NHS, that's the reality you're presented with. Of course, people will go into the private sector to try and look for a solution to try and get around that queue. And that queue has not come out accidentally. That's become as part of deliberate policy by reducing capacity, and now having sufficiently reduced capacity that people are waiting for ambulances, people are waiting for operations, and the answer they get is to their complaints, oh, well, sorry, we were busy, sorry, we don't have capacity. So those people have been forced into the private sector. Now some of them will self-pay, some of them will have insurance. And insurance companies currently rely on, if you've ever gone through the process of insurance for a mortgage, but equally it's the same for health cover, they will rely on a questionnaire that they give you, very detailed questionnaire, and what they will tend to do is exclude you from coverage from all the conditions you have already had. So all this data, which is going to go to unknown third sources, but something that's been very clearly driven towards, it will be available for sale. And it's quite clear that currently we're looking at the reorganisation of our healthcare system, and large insurance companies are coming into the management of these clinical networks. Clinical commissioning groups are being run by health boards, and the insurance industry and private medicine will have a large part to play in those. And they will be the ones actually making the running both in the NHS and increasingly outside the NHS. And for them to have overall access to masses of patient data is clearly going to be key for them to be able to derive maximum profit. But it's not going to be key in either protecting information of patients who have quite legitimately surrendered it to their healthcare professionals to help them be treated. That will not be respected. And it's not going to be the best thing for actually delivering them insurance-based care, because they will find, as the Americans have found, much to their chagrin and regret, that actually when they need healthcare the most, that is the healthcare that they're often least able to access for conditions or predispositions that they have. So it's extremely sensitive data. It is happening on the 21st of June. It is possible to write to your GP and opt out. I will post perhaps on my Twitter feed a link to some articles about this, and also to some documents about how you can opt out. I personally will be opting out. I'll encourage my family to opt out. It is part and parcel of a number of packages delivered by a series of administrations, Labour and Tory, aimed at persistent privatisation of our NHS. I think it's a really clear and present danger to patients and to our NHS, George.
Well, you could knock me down with a feather, and it's my own fault for not knowing that. I assumed the data we're talking about was anonymised, but from what you say, medical information about me that I imparted to my doctor is going to be sold for profit and used against me. And why didn't the Labour Party and the opposition in Britain, why didn't the unions run a huge opt-out campaign if you can opt out?
I think I think it's a good question. I think the publicity has been very low. So until very recently, this has been speculation. There was, again, similar to other changes, like the clinical networks we've been talking about, which are meant to be just for clinical excellence, but in fact are driving towards privatisation. There have been low-level advertising and, if you like, public consultation. There has to be some public consultation. They simply put it on the NHS website. It's obscure. It's hard to find. It's not been widely publicised. And so I think there's been a deliberate stealth policy. It was good. The whole of the pandemic has been a good time to bury this entire news. Matt Hancock's white paper is precisely aimed at putting forward these changes and other changes, one big health pot, both for social care and the NHS, all under clinical commission groups with these new boards who will run it, at whom, yes, there will be some clinicians, yes, there'll be some representatives from hospitals, yes, there'll be some GP representatives, but there'll also be third-party representatives who are business representatives from the health industry, and these people would be administering the entire health budget. So that's the content of Matt Hancock's white paper. And in that process, the process of tendering competitively has been removed, so that actually large contracts can simply be awarded without much scrutiny, much in the way that we've seen throughout the pandemic. The Tory government has been giving huge grants to of 45 million for testing, 10 million here, 20 million there. So this process will continue. It's more opaque, it's more corrupt. And it will become the norm, and it will not help us to access excellent healthcare. It will jeopardize our information. It won't be very clear or transparent where that information is going or who has it. But the clear beneficiaries and drivers behind this are the big insurance lobby. And we know Sir Simon Stevens, who was a sign of United Health. He was the chief executive of their international expansion department, specifically targeting how do we access new markets in large state-run sectors. And then, lo and behold, he comes and he's running the NHS. He's announced he's going to be retiring from his current position as the chief executive of NHS England, step down. I thought that would be the end of his story. Maybe he'll get his lordship and retire. But no, it's also seen on Hansard, there's been a record of consultations suggesting that he may, in fact, end up as the minister overseeing not just the health system, but the health system and the social security system as they're merged, but on the basis of self-payer, increased insurance penetration and increased privatisation. So he'll continue to have a very major role, despite his very clear conflict of interest that he's been the chief executive for 10 years and no doubt remains intimately linked with the private health insurance lobby.
And did Labour oppose this? And if they did, how come I didn't notice it?
Labour have never opposed this. I mean, you'll be aware of my friend and campaigner Bob Gill, his excellent documentary, The Great NHS Heist, in which he highlights some of these issues. During that time we was making that documentary, he actually went to Jeremy Corbyn's secretary, shadow secretary for health, laid this all before him. Jonathan Ashworth, I believe it was, he may still be the secretary of shadow secretary.
How could we tell?
State for Health. Yeah, but it absolutely is like a non-entity. So he had no interest in it. There was never been under Corbyn or under anyone else any opposition to this from Labour. So Labour essentially present this as a fait accompli. We've got to be realistic. We've got to just work within the boundaries of what we can do. And therefore, they don't really even raise it in questioning. They don't even, raise it to voice opposition, even symbolically, let alone have an alternative policy. So it tends to be the case that there's been a very clear handing of the baton from John Major, from Thatcher, John Major, to of course, under Blair years, PFI and all of the extensive penetration of capital and the extraction of profit from the NHS was really ramped up. And that's carried on throughout the subsequent administrations right to the present day without really a murmur or a whisper from any of the Labour Party's MPs, and certainly not from their front bench, George.
Amazing. By the way, here's the opt-out, NHS data opt-out website, your-data-matters.service.nhs.uk. I think it's there on the screen now. Lastly, Doctor, I mean, of course, no disrespect to your profession, but you'll know, as a student of these matters, that the NHS only came into being in the first place over the trenchant opposition of these royal colleges, the head of one of which you quoted earlier. And Nye Bevan said, when asked how he'd managed to get the doctors to drop their opposition to the creation of the NHS, gold, yeah. We stuffed their mouths with gold. In the light of what you've just told me, are some of these doctors' organisations hungry for a bit more gold?
It's no secret, George, that the very top echelons of the medical profession, whether that's the British Medical Association, whether that's any of the royal colleges, end up maybe as lords if they play their cards right. They help the government with their policy. They provide a respectable and trusted face of government policy, and then they are in turn rewarded. And that's, of course, tends to be the same small fraction who benefit very greatly from private practice. I'm not suggesting the abolition of private practice. It's hard to abolish private practice while you have private housing, private health in general. So, but what's quite clear is those people who benefit greatly from a system of increased privatization see that their interests run one way and perhaps don't acknowledge to themselves that the interests of the patient, the country, the workers, of the workers class in general run in quite a different direction. I mean, I have read accounts of GPs predating the NHS, when it was an act of charity to go and visit a sick child, when doctors would engineer the situation not to embarrass their patient. They'd leave their gloves or their hat behind in a home so they'd have an excuse to go and pick it up and re-examine a sick child. Are we really wanting to go back to that state of affairs? I mean, I've already seen that some hospital staffs are in such kind of skeleton situation that they're unable to cope with just the basic demands of the people calling upon them. It's increasingly hard to get an NHS appointment. Matt Hancock has been actively promoting Babylon Health, essentially an app that you talk to that replaces doctors valued at billions. So there's constant, a stream of ideas how to denude the NHS of funds and put them into the hands of wealthy corporations. And of course, just as when you want to overthrow or dominate the economy of a third world country, you need someone inside that country who's going to cooperate with you, who's going to be your puppet. Yes, there'll be a faction of well-heeled, relatively well-off members of the profession who will go along with it. They're not the majority. The majority care, deeply love and the NHS. I think it's a great honour, as I do, to be able to see patients, to treat them free of charge. I've never had to, in my whole life, literally saving thousands of lives, performing thousands of operations, never had to worry whether my patient could afford the treatment, only ever considered what was in their best interest. That's a situation I very much want to preserve. What we need is a very broad-based campaign against this. But I'm afraid to say that the mainstream political parties, Labour included, and Labour are linked in 1,000 ways to most of the campaign groups, whether it's against the war, whether it's against privatisation, and always they want to lead the direction of that campaign back towards the objectives of the Labour Party, which are to get a Labour MP elected. That's not what these campaigns needs to be about. They need to be about preserving the NHS for future generations, because it makes a huge impact to their lives, to our lives, to the lives of ordinary workers. I won't be able to afford, a private care, George. I'm quite sure that the average working class person in this country won't. And if they knew this was the direction that their policies are constantly driving out, if they were honest and open about it, our politicians and the business class, there's absolutely no way that they would have that support. And in that way, Bob is quite right in referring to this as the great NHS heist, as into a great conspiracy against the British public, precisely because it's peddled on the basis of lies by, for example, Tory backbenchers who, in my lifetime, I have seen referring to the NHS as a Stalinist institution because it's not based on the sound principles, in their opinion, of private interest, private business. So this is what we're dealing with. A system in crisis, trying to maximise its profits in any way it can, reducing wages, reducing pay and conditions of working people, epidemics of homelessness and poverty that we're seeing coming out of this pandemic, out of this world economic recession. And one of the ways they seek to preserve themselves is to reduce our social wage, make those who can pay for healthcare, and reduce the access of those who can't. That is what we're facing, George.
Well, I'd like to say it was a pleasure talking to you. It was certainly a privilege, and thanks very much for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Thank you,
Thanks,
Dr.
George.
Brar. I better go to the news. A couple of minutes late, please forgive me, with Jamie Lowe.
The mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free.
Radio Sputnik. We speak your language. Find us at SputnikNews.com.
Radio Sputnik News.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have announced the birth of their second child, a baby daughter named Lilibet Lily Diana Mountbatten Windsor. Harry and Meghan announced that the infant, a first sibling for Archie, was born in California on Friday. Lily is named after her great-grandmother, the Queen, who was affectionately nicknamed Lilibet by her family and her grandmother, Harry's mother, the late Princess Diana. The higher rate of transmission of the so-called Indian variant of coronavirus makes the decision about lifting lockdown restrictions in Britain on June 21st more difficult, Health Secretary Matt Hancock has said. The new variant, also known as the Delta variant, is 40% more transmissible than the Kent strain, he said, leaving the easing of social distancing in the balance for the original target date. Hancock said, "The figure is the latest advice that I have, and that means that it is more difficult to manage this virus with the new Delta variant. But crucially, we believe," he said, "that 2 doses of the vaccine, you get the same protection as the old variant," end quote. He added that hospitalisations were broadly flat, which meant COVID vaccines were working. Under the government's roadmap, the final stage of lifting restrictions would see all legal limits on social contact removed. Nightclubs would also reopen, and restrictions on performances, weddings and other life events would also be lifted. A memorial honouring soldiers who died under British command on D-Day and in the fighting that followed has been unveiled in France on the 77th anniversary of the Normandy landings. The British Normandy Memorial records the names of the 22,442 people who were killed on D-Day and the Battle of Normandy. It cost £30 million and was designed by British architect Liam O'Connor. Due to COVID restrictions, veterans watched the unveiling via video link. Only a small number were able to attend the event in the Normandy town of Vers-sur-Mer, where the memorial is situated. Around 100 veterans unable to travel to Normandy watched a live broadcast from the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire. British and French wreaths were placed in front of the D-Day wall at the memorial in France as bagpipes played. It remembers those who died in the largest seaborne invasion in history, as about 160,000 troops from Britain, the US, Canada, France and other allied nations landed in Normandy. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has promised to save the country's shores from what has been called the sea snot building up in its waters. A thick, slimy layer of the mucus-like matter is spreading along the Sea of Marmara near Istanbul, damaging marine life and the fishing industry. Experts blame pollution and climate change. Sea snot, or marine mucilage, is naturally occurring green sludge that forms when algae is overloaded with nutrients, such as the result of hot weather and water pollution. It was first found in Turkey in 2007, but has also been discovered in the Aegean Sea near Greece. El Salvador's president says he will make the Bitcoin cryptocurrency legal tender in the country. If his plan is backed by Congress, the Central American country would be the first in the world to formally adopt the digital currency. It would be used alongside the US dollar, El Salvador's official currency. President Nayib Bukele says Bitcoin will make it easier for Salvadorians living abroad to send payments home. He said, quote, "In the short term, this will generate jobs and help to provide financial inclusion to thousands outside of the formal economy," Bukele told a Bitcoin conference in Florida, adding that it could also boost investment into the country. American feminist author Naomi Wolf has been suspended from Twitter after spreading vaccine misinformation. Wolf, well known for her acclaimed book, The Beauty Myth, posted a wide range of unfounded theories about vaccines. One tweet claimed that vaccines were, quote, "a software platform that can receive uploads." She also compared Dr. Anthony Fauci, the top COVID advisor in the US, to Satan, to her more than 140,000 followers. Most recently, she tweeted that the urine and feces of people who had received the jab need to be separated from general sewage supplies, while tests were done to measure its impact on non-vaccinated people through drinking water. Donald Trump has again teased supporters about the prospect of another run for the US presidency, just days after some backers pushed a theory that he could be back in the White House by August. He also used a speech at a convention to support candidates loyal to him ahead of next year's midterm elections to denounce China, attack infectious diseases expert Dr. Anthony Fauci as, quote, "not a good doctor," and describe investigations into his finance as a witch hunt. He again continued to peddle false claims that his defeat in the election in 2020 was, quote, "the crime of the century." He won 75 million votes but lost the election to President Joe Biden by 7 million. More than 93 million registered voters in Mexico are today voting to elect 21,000 politicians to all three levels of government. However, the run-up to the polls has been marked by violence and political assassinations. A wave of killings has shaken the current campaign season in a country already devastated by organised crime turf wars for most of the last 2 decades. Between September of last year, when the electoral process began, and the end of May, there were 89 assassinations of politicians in Mexico and 782 crimes committed against them. Electors are choosing governors in almost all of the states and all 500 members of the lower house of Congress. They will also elect members of 30 state legislatures and 1,928 municipal governments out of a total of 2,446. However, despite its size, this election is in many respects about a single man, current President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. López Obrador is not on the ballot, but Mexican analysts say the elections amount to a referendum on the 67-year-old president, a populist, leftist political veteran and former Mexico City mayor who won the presidency in 2018 on his third attempt. And finally, a monkey has been reunited with its human family after being found at a railway station near Glasgow. ScotRail put out an appeal after the small primate was discovered at Cambuslang station on Saturday. In a tweet, staff member Megan said, "I've dealt with lost phones, handbags and glasses over the years, but this is definitely a first. If you've lost your monkey, it's waiting for you on the next service from Cambuslang into town." Later, she tweeted to report that the monkey, believed to be a marmoset, had been reunited with his family and shared a picture of the animal tucking into a tin of fruit. And that's the latest here on Sputnik News. I'm Jamie Lowe.
You're listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway, only on Sputnik Radio.
You're watching and or listening to the mother of all talk shows, the million-strong audience of this global university. And one of the reasons for the success of this show is the caliber of guests that we regularly bring to you. You've already had 2 examples of that this evening. You're about to get a very special 3rd example. He is the columnist on the Haaretz newspaper. I call him, though he's far too modest to concur, the greatest living Israeli. He's Gideon Levy, and he joins me now. Gideon, thank you once again for coming on the show. You scolded me a little in your gentlemanly way a couple of weeks ago when I seemed to imply that Netanyahu was the problem. You pointed out that the problem existed long before Netanyahu and will certainly last far longer than he will. He is no more, or perhaps you might want to tell us differently. And if he is no more to be Prime Minister of Israel, what can you tell us about the people who are about to come after him?
Thank you, George. It's always a great pleasure to be with you. And let's speak also about the quality of the host, not only the quality of the guests.
Thank you.
Which makes the show the mother of all talk shows.
Thank you, sir.
As about Netanyahu, as it seems right now, and I mean, it will be sensational if I'm wrong. Usually I'm not wrong, but this time it's really exceptionally sensational. It seems that Netanyahu will have to step down either on the coming Wednesday or next week, Monday, the latest. This, for many Israelis, it means almost getting out to freedom, getting rid of the great Nour Alshaer of Israel. I don't share it. I don't share it. I think that the Zionist leftists in Israel make their life too easy by believing that the only problem is Netanyahu, or even the main problem is Netanyahu. And once we'll get rid of him, Israel will become this peaceful and just place. I have news for you. This is not going to happen. One right-wing nationalist government is going to replace another right-wing nationalist government. And I'm even not sure which one of the two is going to be more extreme, more nationalistic, more racist, and more standing for the Jewish supremacy in this country.
It's a melancholy prospect, and you could see why, after all these decades of the Nicolae Ceausescu of Israeli politics, as you brilliantly put it, you could see why people feel cheered by his political way going, but it would be foolhardy in the extreme to imagine that anything fundamentally will change. Although there is this difference, isn't there? If I may digress, one of the most bizarre coalitions in British political history was the Fox North coalition. Charles James Fox, the greatest of all British parliamentarians, man who supported the American Revolution, supported the French Revolution, tabled a motion congratulating the people of France on the execution of their king and queen, formed a government with the utter reactionary Lord North. I'll not bore you with all the reasons why, but it didn't last long. Will this coalition, containing some very hard-right Israeli nationalist politicians and 3 members, I think, of an Islamist Palestinian Arab faction, will such a coalition possibly continue for long?
If it will stay as small as it is right now, namely it is based on a majority of 1 seat, of 1 member of parliament, by definition this cannot last for long, because in any given moment there will be found the parliamentarian who will be unsatisfied and say, I'm going to make this government fall. The idea is that after this government will start to function, there might be some other parties who will join this government, and then it can last for very long, even for full 4 years. Nobody knows.
Tell us about this Palestinian Arab Islamist faction. How representative are they of Israel's Palestinian population, and how Islamist are they?
So first of all, just for our listeners and viewers who know less, let me just remind everyone that we have 20% of Israeli population, of the citizens of Israel, without the occupied territories, are Israeli Palestinians, or as the Israelis like to call them, Israeli Arabs. Those 20% are highly discriminated, but they are part and parcel of the democratic game. They can vote, they can be elected, and even though they were quite excluded from the political game until now, came this guy who was part of the joint list and decided he goes for a new way, namely to join any government and to try to get achievements, mainly economical achievements, but not only, to the community of the Israeli Palestinians. Mansour Abbas does not care much about occupation, freedom for the Palestinians, civil rights. All those issues are marginal for him. He decided to devote himself to get better conditions from the relatively most privileged Palestinians, namely the Palestinians who have the Israeli citizenship. This attracted quite many Israeli Palestinians. If he will really deliver the goods. If he won't, he is finished. Right now, he seems like a very shrewd and sophisticated politician who can get quite a lot of things through negotiations. He is very conservative when it comes to gays' rights and issues like this. He's extremely conservative. How much is his party Muslim or fundamentalistic or religious? At least 1 member there is a secular Palestinian. So time will show where will they carry this vote.
Now tell us, who will be the new Prime Minister and his rotating partner? What can you give us a pen portrait, please, Gideon, of these 2 men?
Naftali Bennett is the coming Prime Minister who represents a small party of 6 people, 6 members out of 120, who couldn't make it in the former elections. He wasn't even elected by himself, and his list couldn't even get one seat into the parliament. Naftali Bennett comes from a national religious family, being brought up in the United States, which gives him some kind of international flavor. He speaks fluent English. He was very successful in high tech and made a lot of money. He lives not in a settlement, but in a bourgeois suburb of Tel Aviv. You, George, who spent some time in Tel Aviv, can know the name Ra'anana, which is known to Tel Aviv, next to Herzliya. He has a nice house there. And his party is a very right-wing party, religious and extreme. The only thing is that they are more extreme than him. And he lost his way in a way because part of the settlers were very suspicious about him. He doesn't live in the settlements. He is going to be the prime minister. Time will show where does he stand exactly, because he is married, for example, to a secular Jew, so there are questions how religious he is. He doesn't live in a settlement, so there are questions how nationalistic he is. But by the end of the day, we are dealing with a tough right-winger, and time will show how talented he is, and will he be able to govern with such small, limited political power. The other guy, Yair Lapid, who stands for a bigger party, the second biggest party in the parliament. He is a former TV host who represents the Israel Center, which is, by the end of the day, right-wingers in costume, right-wingers in disguise, because finally they are right-wingers, very bourgeois, very far of any kind of willing to compromise with the Palestinians, or recognizing their rights, recognizing the fact that there are two equal peoples in this part of the world with equal political and national rights. He's very far of recognizing all those things, very charismatic, and he will be prime minister after 2 years if everything will go well. But also him, unfortunately, I'm so sorry, I'm so skeptical tonight, but also Yair Lapid is not a promise for people like me.
Finally, and I'm grateful for your time as always, what now happens to Mr. Netanyahu vis-a-vis the criminal case against him?
This is a long way to go. Obviously, as a non-prime minister, he is weaker vis-a-vis the court, but it will take another 2 or 3 years at least. And I believe he will remain in the parliament, will be head of the opposition, and will do anything possible to have a comeback. And he might have a chance to come back while his trial will go on. And until this trial will not end, he can play politics as much as he wants. The end of the trial is still very far. Nobody knows how will it end. I think the charges are a bit exaggerated, but I don't see him coming out without any punishment. No way.
Gideon Levy, a peerless summary of the political situation in Israel. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Greatly appreciated. Now, the poll is going great guns. 1,513 people have voted. 11% of you are glad that Trump's social media ban has been extended for another 2 years. 81% of you are not, and 8% of you think he should have been banned forever. You've still got time to vote on that on my Twitter feed and on my Telegram. Now, question number 3. This is a brilliant one, actually. Lord Lovett's kilted bagpiper, Bill Millen, was not shot by German snipers on D-Day because A, they thought he was a woman, B, they thought he was mad, Or C, they were rotten shots? I think that is a terrific question. Let me take a 60-second break to contemplate it.
Tough questions are the most powerful weapon we have. As long as you have questions, we'll keep asking. Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Comrade, tired of being trapped in mainstream media? Join the revolution with mother of all talk shows. Has been instrumental in making brain and heart of people stronger, like kettlebell for mind. Don't be brainwashed, CC, an open mind to new way of thinking. If you don't know how, George will teach you. If you won't learn, he will make you. Speak to Comrade Galloway if you think you're hard enough on the mother of all talk shows.
Radio Sputnik.
The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway. The world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
So it turns out that Lord Lovett's bagpiper, Bill Millen, was the only person to land on D-Day wearing a kilt and playing bagpipes. It goes without saying. The British Foreign Office had banned the wearing of kilts for the landing and banned the bagpipes, but Lord Lovett commanded otherwise. So why was he not shot by the German snipers on D-Day? A, they thought he was a woman. B, they thought he was mad. Or C, they were rotten shots. It's actually B, they thought he was mad. He later spoke to German snipers who said that they had not shot him because they thought he was mad. The Trump poll is still rising, 1,705. 13% of you now think it was right to extend his ban for another 2 years. And those of you who think it was wrong is now down to 76%. And those who said ban him forever is up 11%. 1,705 voters so far. The telephone numbers are 08081 965522. That's 08081 if you're in the UK, 965522, and it's entirely free of charge. And if you're in the United States, it's also entirely free of charge, toll free. So it will cost you nothing. It's +1 844 944 3344. Or you can tweet us, of course, at George Galloway at RT UK News. Now, my next guest, I think, is a caller. It's Paul in Birkenhead on Israel. Go ahead, Paul.
Hi, George. Thanks,
Hi there.
let me through.
Welcome, sir. Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to mention about a petition that's on the government Houses of Parliament website about placing sanctions against Israel.
Yeah, there's a debate on the 14th of June, I think.
Yes, it is. Yeah, so it's a week tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I just wanted the people who don't know that if they could, it was 380 over 380,000.
That's a big petition. That's a big petition.
It is.
And the rules are, I'm a little rusty with parliamentary rules. I hope to refamiliarize myself with them soon. But if you get more than 100,000 signatures, there must be a parliamentary debate on the subject.
Yeah.
Well, this petition beat that 3 times over and more.
Yeah. So, but I think still need. I think the more people, the better. So, I think.
What's the petition? What's the petition called, Paul?
I'm not sure. It's just
Palestine.
Anyway, anybody just go on the website and just put in Israeli petition, and you'll find it. It's on the top. It's there.
Okay.
There is a number of petitions, anyways. But,
yeah. But they want the one with the more than 300,000 signatures, just to maximise that. And it calls for sanctions against Israel, so you can guarantee that the Labour Party will not be supporting it, which will do them some damage in some places.
Well, hopefully. I mean, hopefully you do some damage yourself on the by-election next month. So,
thank you, Paul. Very kind of you to say so. Fred is in Buxton. He's a new caller, particularly welcome, therefore. Fred, go ahead.
Hello, George.
Take your time. Don't be nervous.
I'm fine, George. I have actually spoken to you before on the victory of a certain red club against the blue club.
Oh, yes. Excellent.
Do you remember I spoke to you that evening?
I think I do.
We celebrated briefly together.
We celebrated together. Let's hope we get another chance next season. Have you seen Ferguson's documentary?
I'm going to watch it with my son.
It's really very powerful indeed. It's epic. It's moving. It's exciting. I'm glad my sons all watched it with me because, well, look, let's face it, in their lifetime, United have not been that much to look at.
No, they haven't.
But they were able to see in this documentary just exactly what Manchester United were and hopefully will be again. Anyway, off the football. What else would you like to talk about?
What I wanted to talk to you about was the BBC chiefly.
Yeah.
And why nobody's bringing them to account for the lies that they keep spinning, the government narrative they keep spinning. You know, it's so frustrating I used to respect the BBC.
I think the only people who respect the BBC anymore are those that are sucking at its engorged teat and those who want to.
I couldn't agree more, George.
I see no evidence of any love in the country anymore for the BBC.
No, and as such, maybe it's time for the chopping block.
Well, if I was in charge, I mean, if I was the Prime Minister of Britain, or let me put it another way, if I was Boris Johnson, I would radically cut the BBC. I would slim it down.
Yeah, but to be fair, to be fair, George, at the moment, the BBC have been pretty useful to Boris. Do you not agree?
No, I don't actually. I mean, of course, they preferred Boris Johnson to Jeremy Corbyn, and all those that now complain about Boris Johnson were the very people who went the extra mile to do down Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah,
so to that extent, I agree. But the Liberal agenda, the anti-Brexit agenda, the woke identity politics agenda, which is spreading like wildfire in the BBC, the Tories don't like that at all.
Yeah, well, perhaps we'll agree to disagree on that. But really, what I wanted to say also, George, I'm a 50-something bloke now. I've seen the best years of my life. I've watched my children grow up. I've met my grandchildren. I would be prepared to walk through Gaza with a Palestinian flag in one hand, a Union flag in the other hand, and a wreath around my neck, and risk a bullet to lay that wreath at the wall for the children of Palestine.
That's a very, very powerful call indeed, Fred, and will be long remembered. Thank you very much for making it. Terence is in Norwich on the same subject. Go ahead, Terence.
Good evening, Mr. Galloway. How are you?
By the grace of God, I'm in good spirits. Thank you.
Me too. And listening to that lady earlier, and fellow Manchester United supporter Fred, it was pitiful to listen to that lady. I think the point, even Gideon Levy has missed the point that I'm going to make, is that these Abraham Accords that Kushner had been over at the background doing these things, all his work, getting Tony Bennett to come in, a friend of his, Jared Kushner, the Abraham Accord, they just slipped that in. Gideon Levy, I think, missed that. I think his whole premise is great. However, don't take your eye off these Abraham Accords. You've got America with the UAE slipping in these highness people. And I was really pleased to see last week a sheik from the UAE going to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Forgive me for liking this, but he was spat at by a young kid, and the other men were around him asking him questions. What are you doing here? This is actually America's game plan. They've slipped in these so-called Abraham Accords, and Mr. Biden is not changing it. Tony Bennett's not going to do anything different to Netanyahu, who doesn't care one jot. And Mr. Levy was quite right there. The only small country that I can give credit to, and the party Sinn Féin, they said the Israeli ambassador should be removed from Ireland. And I totally agree, because until you start sanctions, the apartheid there is not going to change. Hannah Nasrawi, a lot of respect for her, she said the two states is never going to happen now. It's finished, and I agree. There has to be cohabitation. How we get there, I think America is the big problem. The world needs to take sanctions against Israel, the way they're treating and killing ritually. They have not kept one UN resolution. And what a man said there earlier was pitiful, and I'd like to walk alongside him. I don't fear death at all as a Catholic, and I'm proud the man said that, and well said indeed. But don't lose sight of these Abraham Accords, Mr. Galloway.
No, I shan't. I'm not as pessimistic as you about them. I think they'll die, they'll wither on the vine. But you're right, pernicious indeed they were. Thanks for the call. Nathaniel is in Berkshire, and he wants to talk about Trump and the social media ban. Go ahead, Nat.
Hi, George. Big fan.
Thank you.
Obviously, I'm a bit younger, like just turned 20, so I'm
okay.
Not as
take your
experienced
time.
as you.
No, take your time.
I just wanted to basically get your side of this whole thing, because I was pretty much leaning on the side that it was a good thing to ban him, because, I mean, surely he incited the violence on that Capitol, so
well, if we were
to,
Nathaniel, if we were to ban everyone who has incited violence, there would be very few politicians on social media. Tony Blair's on social media, and he killed 1 million people in Iraq. The Deputy Prime Minister who made the decision to ban Donald Trump is jointly and severally responsible for a great deal of violence and blood shed in the bombing of Syria, for example, and other places. John Major, Jack Straw, none of these people would be on social media. George W. Bush wouldn't be on it. You'd have to ban people who are responsible for a great deal more violence than Donald Trump was responsible for. But there are two issues of principle that need to be addressed, I think, by a young man like you. First of all, who will guard the guards? Who will decide who is to be banned? And secondly, if they can ban the President of the United States, they can ban anybody. They might not like the cut of your jib, Nat, or mine, perhaps more likely to be mine. And then they close me down, and you can't hear what I've got to say, and I can't reach you. You see my point? Last word to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. So you're just saying it's basically like a publicity stunt, and really...
Well, I think they're hypocrites. I think if social media is to be the public square, and that's what they told us it was, that's the basis on which they are not treated as publishers. You see, if you have a newspaper, you decide who writes in your newspaper. But they said they were not a newspaper. They were not a television station. They were not responsible for what people said on their platform. And they made a lot of money by being free of the restrictions that would have come with being a publisher, with being a broadcaster. They could not be sued, for example, for what someone wrote on their wall or said on their platform. And they were extremely lucky to get away with that designation. But they have, until now, gotten away with that designation. But in banning someone like Donald Trump, they are acting as a publisher. They are acting as a regulator. And who are they? Who gave Zuckerberg or Sir Nick Clegg the right to ban thee or me from social media. Nathaniel, thank you very much for the call. Now, the poll is almost closed, I think. 1,861 votes. 14% of you are glad that Sir Nick prevailed and Trump was banned, at least for another 2 years. 74%, nearly three-quarters of you think that it was wrong, but 12% of you think he should have been banned forever. The Telegram poll is almost exactly the same. Now, here's a question. This week, in 1968, where was James Earl Ray arrested for the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King? Was it A, London, B, Memphis, or C, New York? A quick break, 60 seconds. Count them.
Radio Sputnik.
Call me. Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough. Don't bring up a false name. Come on air. Call me and let's have this matter out.
Let's get ready to rumble!
How have you got the nerve to tell people to Brexit if you're not telling them the repercussions?
That's 2016's argument, Michael. I'm no longer arguing with you about the merits of Brexit. I'm arguing with you about democracy, about the right of the majority to have their decision, their vote implemented.
This match will get red hot.
Not have a referendum. Let them have a referendum. Let them sort it out amongst themselves.
I want a referendum. Robert, I want a referendum. Let me put that in capital letters. If you think this year, which is shaping up already to be an annus miserabilis for the SNP, if you think this is your year, go ahead. Come on. Let's have it out.
It's on.
But no, George, it's not as simple as that, right? Have you seen the documentary about Cambridge Analytica and the people who work there? Have you looked at the global
I know nothing about them. I'm not interested in them.
Precisely. But
I'm not
because you don't know about them.
I'm not interested in them, Bruce, because it's all a red herring. Just like Russiagate was a red herring.
You're up.
Do you only want to hear voices that agree with you? Because if you do, you're not clever enough to be at this open university of the airwaves. In fact, you need to go back to remedial and learn something about what democracy and freedom of speech actually mean.
Tough questions are the most powerful weapon we have. As long as you have questions, we'll keep asking. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
Now, my good wife has joined me. How lucky am I? In fact, she came in to scold me for slouching, so I'm trying to sit ramrod straight. But she is going to tell us some of the things that are on social media. But just before you do, the mother of all tweets has to be Bill Karmetsky. Galloway hates his own kind, his ancestry, his culture, to suck up to Bolshevik power and money. I wish there was Bolshevik power and money to suck up to. Tell me, Gayatri, what's rattling?
Right, so the poll is doing very well. It brings up a lot of commentary.
Huge number, and almost 2,000 people voted on it.
Odell Sheeran says, I don't care for Trump's politics, but censorship of a former president in the land of the free. Doesn't sound very free indeed. And Alan Healy says, I say ban Nick Clegg, not just from Twitter. And Paul Murphy says, by banning Trump, they're actually showing how relevant he is and that they're scared shirtless. And Michael Albanese says Donald Trump incited insurrection against the government of the US. He not only should be banned from social media, he should be imprisoned for life. or better yet, executed, as per the Trump administration's resurrection of the execution of federal prisoners.
No, we disapprove of that,
We
and
do.
also shirtlessness. Now, the buzz around the left at the time, in America and in Britain, was that he had it coming. And we had it from a caller earlier, that he had it coming. But more sensible people surely worked out that if Nick Clegg can ban Trump, he can ban anybody, and he might ban you next, or someone that you like, someone that you support, and then they become a non-person. I haven't heard from Donald Trump for months. I'd like to know what he's saying.
I know.
It's my right in a free society, isn't it?
It is your right. However, Marek makes the point, I don't agree with Sir Nick Clegg, but hey, never mind. At least we can read and hear what the not cognitively impaired et al. Sippy Cup Joe Biden has to say anytime he wants.
Yeah, but nobody wants to see a tweet by Joe Biden. I mean, let's face it. I mean, he doesn't say or do anything interesting.
It's outrageous, isn't it? It's outrageous. Speaking as a non-Trump fan, we want to have him... actually, he was very interesting.
Well, he's certainly entertaining.
Do you want to hear about COVID?
Yeah?
Because people were very happy to see Dr. Ranjeet Brar back.
Very good. I was very happy about it myself.
Some of them, like James Vickers, they were a bit worried that he wouldn't be back after giving an objective view on the vaccine side effects.
Oh, no. He's still he's the Moats medic forever.
Yes, but...
They've got him on a long-term contract.
Echoes Bunny Woman says, is Galloway still pushing the COVID scamdemic narrative?
Yawn.
Anyway, the digital ID roll is rolling out fast and the globalists are panicking, and she says, therefore, the COVID is falling apart. Someone has looked up at the NHS app, though, Lord Charfield, and it categorically says the patient data cannot be used for insurance and marketing purposes.
Well, everyone should opt out, and then it definitely cannot. I don't think Dr. Ranjeet was making it up.
I haven't heard you make a comment about Lilibet yet.
Who's that?
Lilibet, the new royal baby.
Whose baby?
The Duchess of Sussex.
Meghan?
Meghan and Harry.
Oh, my sincere apologies. I didn't even know about it.
The baby was born today, Lilibet. Lilibet Diana.
That's a kind of, what would you call it? An abbreviation, but a sweetheart one of Elizabeth, yeah?
Yes. But Deirdre says...
Lilibet Diana.
Yes.
Oh, very nice. Well, congratulations, Harry and Meghan, and to all their family. I'm sure there's much rejoicing in the royal palaces of Britain today over this wonderful news.
Deirdre says, however, such hypocrisy to name your daughter after your grandmother after publicly throwing the royal family under the bus with Oprah, whilst her husband, Philip, was ill and then hospitalized and then died.
They're kind of acting as if that had never happened, I think, hoping to move on. Not sure the others in the royal family will let them, but there you go.
Finally, I don't know why this came up, or I think I know, because of today's game, about Romania.
Again.
About Romania, reckless abandon says Ceausescu and his wife were not unpopular. They were assassinated by British agents in the military. Is this on the back of the game with England?
Actually, I know that not to be true because I wrote a book on it. It's called Downfall, the Ceausescus and the Romanian Revolution. I'm not sure how available it still is. It was 30 years ago, but you'll get the truth in there. Thank you.
That's it. Yes.
Mrs. Very nice to see you back on the Moats screen, and I promise to sit up straight for the rest of the show. Now, I didn't give you the answer. James Earl Ray was arrested for the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King in London. Interesting that. What was he doing in London? Was he making a run for it? Anyway, let's go to the phone lines. It's Wayne in Cheshire. Wayne, welcome to the show.
Always a pleasure. Just some information about the 100,000 signatures for the debate.
Yes.
A couple of months, when they brought it in, they said they had to have debates for more than 100,000 signatures. A couple of months afterwards, they changed the rules because they didn't like what the debates were going to be. So now they are willing to look at having a debate.
Ah, so it's no longer mandatory?
No.
I told you I was rusty on the rules on that, but I hope to oil that rust quite soon. But it is going ahead. It is on the 14th. It is a week tomorrow, isn't it?
I couldn't tell you because I've rang up for something else about Keir Starmer.
I'm pretty sure, but go ahead anyway, Wayne.
Well, if I was giving advice to Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, and this is quite sincerely, I would tell him to grow his hair, unwash, dress scruffy as possible, openly be seen drunk and smoking cannabis in the street, have many adulterous affairs, fully privatise the NHS he wants to do, tax oxygen in the air and immerse himself in corruption, and then he might get some votes.
Well, he did, of course, regularly try LSD when at Leeds University, which I found quite extraordinary, that a Queen's Counsel, former DPP, now leader of Her Majesty's opposition, didn't just inhale, but actually was an LSD fiend. So he does have a history, Wayne.
I didn't actually know that. Now, I've come to the 100% conclusion that either the British public are completely insane and uneducated and stupid, or the whole thing is fixed, or they just love the insanity, the craziness of Boris Johnson.
Well, I think that makes you quite a typical leftist who wants to abolish the people and appoint a new one.
I don't understand what you're trying to say.
Well, what I'm trying to say is the British people have a view on Keir Starmer versus Boris Johnson. It's quite a settled view now, 91 polls in a row, and they prefer Boris Johnson. So your answer to that is that they are insane. Well, maybe it's your side of politics that isn't relating to the British people. After all, twice as many working class people prefer Boris Johnson to Keir Starmer.
But you're not understanding. What I'm trying to say is, let's just go for the NHS. Why would anyone with any intelligence want to vote for something like the NHS?
Because they don't know.
As good as it could possibly be.
Because they don't know, and that's because the Labour Party, which is supposed to be the opposition, gets millions of pounds to be the opposition from the state, isn't an opposition at all. You heard Dr. Ranjeet earlier. The Labour Party hasn't even opposed the mass transfer of our medical records to private business.
I know. Could you honestly, I know you can only say much on the television, why are they doing this, Labour?
I think Labour hates the British people and cannot hide it. And I think the British people hate the Labour Party back. It's not just Brexit, though Brexit was a big turning point. I think there will be no turning back from it. But it's been going on for decades. The Labour Party's infatuation with woke identity politics, endlessly dividing people with talk of sex and gender and race and sexual orientation and pronouns and politically correct speech, convinced the British people that Labour hated them, and I think they are now hated back.
Okay, I know it sounds stupid, but what does this woke mean?
It means all the things I've just described. Thanks very much, Wayne. A new caller is Ordell in Manchester. Go ahead, Ordell.
Hi, George. Nice to speak to you again.
And you?
I just want to talk about Palestine, really. Sadly, I was protesting back in 2014 in Manchester after the genocide that Israel was committing against the people in Palestine. And sadly, 7 years later, we're still doing the same thing. I was at Oldham yesterday demanding that the Elbit factory in Oldham be shut down.
There have been some heroic protesters there on the roof and so on. This is a factory that produces drones for the Israeli military
that's right.
in the northwest of England. Who'd have thunk it? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's the only factory apparently in the north of England that is producing these drones. So we would want to get it shut down. 240 civilians killed in Gaza, and it's done on my doorstep. What I wanted to make the point is something you touched on earlier. We've been protesting for years, and people are with us at the moment. Court of public opinion is with us, but sadly the people in power are not. My local MP in Hyden Staley Bridge is a part of Labour LFI, Labour Friends of Israel, and he's the vice chair there. And we have a big Asian community in Hyden Staley Bridge, and his majority is diminishing all the time. I want to make the point that these Labour safe seats now, with the support of Israel, we need to kind of lobby against them and pressure them to get them out of power, like we do with BDS.
Well, it's a terrific call, Ordell, and I'm grateful for it. Half of all Labour MPs, are members of the Labour Friends of Israel. And it's the most powerful half of the Parliamentary Labour Party that get most of the jobs, including every single shadow minister at the Foreign Office with responsibility for the Middle East has been a member of the Labour Friends of Israel. But 75% of all Conservative MPs are members of the Conservative Friends of Israel. What is it, Ordell, about Israel that attracts all these friends?
I suppose they lobby a lot harder than us and a lot smarter than us. We need to protest in a smarter way.
A very, very good answer, young man. Thank you very much for giving it. Elliot is in Florida on the Trump ban. Go ahead, Elliot.
Oh, George, thank you. Nice to talk to you again. We had this out before, and I support banning Trump for reasons that I'm sure you don't appreciate. But I wanted to address your narrative of the whole thing, which it seems a bit specious. The fact that in Europe there are laws against hate speech, and there are none here. But aside from that, it seems like the narrative that if we allow them, the powerful media, to do this to Trump, then we're next. No, we're not next. We were first. We were first, and we will be next and last, and it will continue.
So you're content for these people to have the power to ban Trump. You're content for these people to have the power to ban you?
I have no... It's not mine to say. I have no power one way or the other. They are the billionaires. They are the media.
Okay,
they have
and you're
the power
content.
to do
You're
what they
content.
want.
You're content with that.
I'm not content. No, I'm content with
So you don't want them to ban you or me, but you want them to ban Trump.
The people. I don't want them to ban the progressives, the people that are pro-Palestinian, but they are doing that.
Yeah, and you denounce it. Yeah. You don't think. Hold on, Elliot. You don't think they should have the power to ban thee and me, what you call the progressives, but you're absolutely content for them to ban others. How do you think that is going to hold as an intellectual position?
That's a specious argument. It's not one black and white, or it's not it's not equal.
Well,
the ban on one hand, you're banning
us despite your opposition. Please, they banned us despite your opposition. Now they've banned him. So you're content that they should have the power to decide who can speak and where?
No, there's one. On one hand, it's political speech in the case of banning pro-Palestinian or
an Israeli would say
that they don't like.
Israeli calls it hate speech.
In the case of Trump, let me finish. Let me finish this. In the case of Trump, they banned him because he was inciting insurrection and was threatening to continue to incite insurrection again. That's the point.
All right, I'll let you finish. But that's exactly what Netanyahu would say about my speech this evening. I'm inciting insurrection. He would call it hate speech. In fact, he's probably already done so to my boss in Moscow. You see, your argument is disappearing up its own fundament.
No, not at all. You're not the President of the United States.
One man's hate speech is another man's free speech.
Oh my gosh.
Elliot,
it's not up,
Elliot, they told me you wanted
consensus.
a fight. I thought you'd be a bit more effective in the ring, I must say. Anyway, it's time for the news. To calm down with Jamie Lowe.
The mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free.
Radio Sputnik. We speak your language. Find us at SputnikNews.com.
Radio Sputnik News.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have announced the birth of their second child, a baby daughter named Lily Diana Mountbatten Windsor. Harry and Meghan announced that the infant, a first sibling for Archie, was born in California on Friday. Lily is named after her great-grandmother, the Queen, who was affectionately nicknamed Lilibet by her family and her grandmother, Harry's mother, the late Princess Diana. The higher rate of transmission of the so-called Indian variant of coronavirus makes the decision about lifting lockdown restrictions in Britain on June 21st more difficult, Health Secretary Matt Hancock has said. The new variant, also known as the Delta variant, is 40% more transmissible than the Kent strain, he said, leaving the easing of social distancing in the balance for the original target date. Hancock said, "The figure is the latest advice that I have, and that means that it is more difficult to manage this virus with the new Delta variant. But crucially, we believe," he said, "that 2 doses of the vaccine, you get the same protection as the old variant," end quote. He added that hospitalizations were broadly flat, which meant COVID vaccines were working. Under the government's roadmap, the final stage of lifting restrictions would see all legal limits on social contact removed. Nightclubs would also reopen, and restrictions on performances, weddings and other life events would also be lifted. A memorial honouring soldiers who died under British command on D-Day and in the fighting that followed has been unveiled in France on the 77th anniversary of the Normandy landings. The British Normandy Memorial records the names of the 22,442 people who were killed on D-Day and the Battle of Normandy. It cost £30 million and was designed by British architect Liam O'Connor. Due to COVID restrictions, veterans watched the unveiling via video link. Only a small number were able to attend the event in the Normandy town of Vers-sur-Mer, where the memorial is situated. Around 100 veterans unable to travel to Normandy watched a live broadcast from the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire. British and French wreaths were placed in front of the D-Day wall at the memorial in France as bagpipes played. It remembers those who died in the largest seaborne invasion in history, as about 160,000 troops from Britain, the US, Canada, France and other allied nations landed in Normandy. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has promised to save the country's shores from what has been called the sea snot building up in its waters. A thick, slimy layer of the mucus-like matter is spreading along the Sea of Marmara near Istanbul, damaging marine life and the fishing industry. Experts blame pollution and climate change. Sea snot, or marine mucilage, is naturally occurring green sludge that forms when algae is overloaded with nutrients, such as the result of hot weather and water pollution. It was first found in Turkey in 2007, but has also been discovered in the Aegean Sea near Greece. El Salvador's president says he will make the Bitcoin cryptocurrency legal tender in the country. If his plan is backed by Congress, the Central American country would be the first in the world to formally adopt the digital currency. It would be used alongside the US dollar, El Salvador's official currency. President Nayib Bukele says Bitcoin will make it easier for Salvadorians living abroad to send payments home. He said, quote, "In the short term, this will generate jobs and help to provide financial inclusion to thousands outside of the formal economy," Bukele told a Bitcoin conference in Florida, adding that it could also boost investment into the country. American feminist author Naomi Wolf has been suspended from Twitter after spreading vaccine misinformation. Wolf, well known for her acclaimed book, The Beauty Myth, posted a wide range of unfounded theories about vaccines. One tweet claimed that vaccines were, quote, "a software platform that can receive uploads." She also compared Dr. Anthony Fauci, the top COVID advisor in the US, to Satan, to her more than 140,000 followers. Most recently, she tweeted that the urine and feces of people who had received the jab need to be separated from general sewage supplies, while tests were done to measure its impact on non-vaccinated people through drinking water. Donald Trump has again teased supporters about the prospect of another run for the US presidency, just days after some backers pushed a theory that he could be back in the White House by August. He also used a speech at a convention to support candidates loyal to him ahead of next year's midterm elections to denounce China, attack infectious diseases expert Dr. Anthony Fauci as, quote, "not a good doctor," and describe investigations into his finance as a witch hunt. He again continued to peddle false claims that his defeat in the election in 2020 was, quote, "the crime of the century." He won 75 million votes but lost the election to President Joe Biden by 7 million. More than 93 million registered voters in Mexico are today voting to elect 21,000 politicians to all three levels of government. However, the run-up to the polls has been marked by violence and political assassinations. A wave of killings has shaken the current campaign season in a country already devastated by organised crime turf wars for most of the last 2 decades. Between September of last year, when the electoral process began, and the end of May, there were 89 assassinations of politicians in Mexico and 782 crimes committed against them. Electors are choosing governors in almost all of the states and all 500 members of the lower house of Congress. They will also elect members of 30 state legislatures and 1,928 municipal governments out of a total of 2,446. However, despite its size, this election is in many respects about a single man, current President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. López Obrador is not on the ballot, but Mexican analysts say the elections amount to a referendum on the 67-year-old president, a populist, leftist political veteran and former Mexico City mayor who won the presidency in 2018 on his third attempt. And finally, a monkey has been reunited with its human family after being found at a railway station near Glasgow. ScotRail put out an appeal after the small primate was discovered at Cambuslang station on Saturday. In a tweet, staff member Megan said, "I've dealt with lost phones, handbags and glasses over the years, but this is definitely a first. If you've lost your monkey, it's waiting for you on the next service from Cambuslang into town." Later, she tweeted to report that the monkey, believed to be a marmoset, had been reunited with his family and shared a picture of the animal tucking into a tin of fruit. And that's the latest here on Sputnik News. I'm Jamie Lowe.
You're listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway, only on Sputnik Radio.
You're watching and listening to the Open University of the Airwaves. We just had a bumper poll. More than 2,152 people exactly voted, and 16% of you are glad that Donald Trump's social media ban has been extended for another 2 years. 71% of you are not glad, and 13% of you think he should have been banned forever. So still a healthy lead for free speech, but not as healthy as it was earlier in the evening. Here's the second poll. Now that Sir Keir Starmer is 16 points behind Boris Johnson, Should he A, resign, B, please stay, or C, be forced to go? You can vote now on my Twitter feed. Well, let's get the perspective of an American of note, Garland Nixon, in my opinion, the finest independent political correspondent working in the United States. My good friend and colleague, Garland Nixon, joins me now. Garland, welcome back to the show. Let me start with that one, if I may, because I've just had a spirited discussion with a caller from Florida who bemoans the banning of people like me, progressives, he called me, though I kind of shuddered at that description because I know the other people that are called progressives, but fully supports the ban on Donald Trump. Where do you stand on that, and what do you think of the decision to continue Trump's social media purdah?
Well, I absolutely oppose it. And, you know, to be transparent, I am on the National Board of Directors for the American Civil Liberties Union in Maryland. So I mean, in the U.S. So I consider myself a civil libertarian. And I believe that if people disagree with Donald Trump, then they should hear what he has to say. He should have an opportunity to make his point, and they should have an opportunity to rebut it. I believe that a democracy works best with informed voters, and having Donald Trump give his point, his position, allows people to be informed. You know, we should be informed not only of those that we agree with, but those that we disagree with. And it leads me to believe that there is nefarious intent behind those who would ban Donald Trump's speech. You know, it has been said by many that, you know, every other word Donald Trump says is a lie, but that also means that every other word he says is true. And I actually believe the reason Donald Trump is really banned is because every now and then he will hit the nail on the head. And on that odd occasion, he will attack the empire. He will attack neoliberalism, whether genuinely or disingenuously. He will attack the machine in a way that no one else will. And I look forward to those odd occasions. And
well, they say
people
even a stopped clock is right twice a day. And Trump was definitely right twice a day and wrong most of the rest. But the twice a day was sometimes significant, as you say. Question is this non-personing, this airbrushing of Donald Trump from the political spectrum, is it working, Garland? Is absence making the heart grow fonder of Trump amongst his voting base, which, let's not forget, was in excess of 70 million voters? Or is it out of sight, out of mind?
It's absolutely not working because the foundational belief behind banning Donald Trump is flawed. It's the boogeyman politics that the Donald Trump political phenomenon is only about the individual Donald Trump, and it only came about because Donald Trump became the president in 2016. People like me argue that Donald Trump is the result of a particular neoliberal and neoconservative politics that caused people to look for something else. In fact, I know people who completely disagree with Donald Trump and voted for him. You know, it was kind of a Brexit-like thing that said, I just want to take a sledgehammer to the system. Well, those people are still there. The dynamics have gotten worse because of COVID and people, you know, watching Jeff Bezos and the billionaires clean up while everybody else suffers. So I think it does no good because it ignores the dynamics that created the phenomenon that is Donald Trump.
Is he still alive and kicking? Can you tell us?
As far as we know, Donald Trump is still out there. He's still making noise. And again, some of the things that Donald Trump says, I just shake my head and say that's absurd. But I don't think that Donald Trump is going away. And I don't think Trumpism is going away. I think if Donald Trump moved, you know, just went mute tomorrow, I don't think it would matter. There would be someone there to voice that Donald Trump position. And there are people there who are thirsty for that brand of politics. So I don't think any of this will work. It's futile.
Let's turn to his nemesis. I've seen videos of speeches and other events by President Biden with only a few hundred viewers on them. And I can testify from this side of the pond, Joe Biden, President Biden, almost never says anything of interest to me. Is that echoed in the United States? Are they already bored of him?
You know, it's hard to say because you know, I think many people in the country view Joe Biden as, you know, representative of neoliberalism, representative of globalist politics. So, you know, while Joe Biden, many look at him as, you know, somewhat incompetent, I think a lot of people in the country look at him as part of a political movement, as it were, a very powerful political movement. And so I don't think the individual Joe Biden is viewed as a president would have been 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah, I kind of get that impression. Anyway, turning to media matters. You keep a very close eye on the U.S. media. What's rattling? What are the big stories there in the U.S.?
Well, there are a couple of stories. One of them is, of course, Hunter Biden, you know, is the story that will never go away.
And disappeared just in time for the election.
Yes, it was disappeared. It was extraordinarily renditioned by the mainstream media. But the latest being the Blue Star Strategies, which was a lobbying firm, which now it's being very clear that Hunter Biden and the Obama political machine, the Democratic political machine, were kind of working in concert to enrich a lot of people related to the globalists. They basically went to Ukraine and got rich. What's interesting about this is the way that it's being portrayed by the mainstream media. They're saying, well, Blue Star Strategies didn't register as a foreign agent. Well, that's, you know, a fairly minor infraction. It would be the equivalent of Garland Nixon parks in front of an apartment building, blows the building up and kills 100 people, and then the news reports tomorrow Garland Nixon illegally parks in front of apartment building. That's the way, you know, it's obvious they're trying to hide something here because there's so much to this story. It just keeps growing. And
I mean, are other politicians implicated in this? Is Joe Biden implicated in it?
Yeah, there are pictures that have come out that show Joe Biden actually at dinner with business friends of Hunter Biden, while in fact he claimed that he didn't know anything. You know, the other thing that's being very clear, and I think it's important now, is Joe Biden runs around the world telling people that he's going to lead a movement of democracies against autocracies. And one thing that's being you know, abundantly clear is that when the United States overthrew the Ukraine in 2014, Joe Biden was in fact an autocrat. That basically Barack Obama assigned Joe Biden as a governor or viceroy, whatever term you want to use, but he was a
What a pity. I was so fascinated by that story. I do hope that we get back to it. What will I do now? Take a call? Oh, he's back. You were just saying, Garland, that Barack Obama made Joe Biden the viceroy of the Ukraine. Tell us more. We've lost him. What a great, great pity. If we get him back, we will. Assad is in Gothenburg in Sweden. We must go there. Assad, welcome.
Hi, George.
Hello there.
Thank you for taking my call.
I've never had a call, I think, from Gothenburg. So you're particularly welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. My question is about a lot of money laundering that has happened since for many years from countries like poor countries, in particular like the Pakistan or India or Bangladesh or all the other African countries, so UK in particular. There's nothing going to be happen. I mean, you can take the one example of the former Prime Minister of Pakistan. He took a lot of money, laundered it to UK, and now he's sitting, hiding over there. And UK government is protecting. What is your take on it? Could you please elaborate?
Well, I mean, the laws of libel preclude me doing so, and I'm glad you didn't name the individual concerned. London is the hot money capital of the whole world, and political leaders, presidents, former presidents, prime ministers by the dozen, by the score actually, have parked their illegally acquired money here, inflating property prices, boosting the profits of the casinos, and so on. It is actually a major scandal. When I was running for Mayor of London, I tried to highlight it, but it's only some exiles and autocrats that the British government is concerned with. I don't know which former Prime Minister of Pakistan you referred to. Frankly, it could have been one of many. Let's go to Sydney, Australia, and talk with Michael. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, hi, George. Look, I called in a couple of weeks ago about the inability. Yes. Yeah, the inability of politicians to sort of reach the working class, the politicians on the left. Yeah. And I sort of view like the neoliberal like agenda as sort of like the reaction, like, you know, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And I think the thing people like, well, actually I know the thing people like about Trump and about Boris Johnson, because I'm very much on the left. I'm not a progressive, and as some people don't label myself a progressive. I'm a true.
I hate that word. I totally hate that word, Michael.
Yeah. I'm anti-imperialist. I'm not part of the imperial left who want to go around justifying the bombing of countries, you know. But just on Donald Trump, I mean, at the end of the day, and you're exactly right, George. You know, when I was in university here in Australia in my undergraduate degree, people tried to get me to get a protest about the shutting down of a racist politician we had here in Australia, Pauline Hanson, and banning her meetings and everything. I said, yeah, so we go there and ban her meetings, and the next thing you know, people are banning our meetings. You know, and that's why I wouldn't go. And they basically tried to brainwash me into going, but I wouldn't go. So I ended up leaving that establishment anyway. But at the end of the day, you can't go around banning people because, you know, like Voltaire, I think said, basically, I may not believe what you have to say, but I'll defend your right to say it. Right?
Well,
and
that's the only sensible position, Michael, even from a self-interest point of view. After all, as my caller from Florida freely conceded, it was people like him, and by extension people like me, that were banned first. So you're giving these people the right to ban, including you, including banning you. It's just bonkers. But quite apart from that, I want, Michael, to know what Trump is saying. What's the point in Trump being underground with 70 million followers? That's actually a very dangerous situation.
I mean, they have the Bill of Rights, and the First Amendment is the freedom of, or the first thing is the freedom of speech. They actually kicked the sitting president of the United States off social media. It was the sitting president of the United States. Exactly. I mean, is that a free country? I mean,
land of the free, home of the brave. Michael, thank you for a wonderful call. I'm cutting you short because the great Garland Nixon is back. Garland, sorry about the technical difficulties. You were describing the extent to which Joe Biden was effectively made the viceroy of the Ukraine back when they overthrew the elected government, president, burned the parliament, banned the Russian language, and all the other egregious offenses. The viceroy was Joe Biden. And from what you implied, he may have been making hay while the sun was shining on him.
Yes. Well, there's little doubt of that now, that he and his family members were really cleaning up. One of the things that came out is that Blue Star Strategies, and this was a consulting firm, a PR firm that was working with his son Hunter Biden, was allowed to participate on a White House conference call with the State Department, members of the inner circle of the White House, and with people in Ukraine. And after that call, they sent a memo. They sent it to Burisma. They sent it to a number of people in Ukraine, and they used that call to make money. So when you start looking into what happened, it was obvious. It was blatant corruption, but the U.S. media covers it as the only thing they're covering is the most minor infraction of Blue Star Strategies, and that is they didn't fill out their proper forms to show that they were working for Ukrainian companies. And we've seen people have done that, who are allowed to go back and to fill the reforms out and not be prosecuted. So I suspect that there is a massive cover-up, and I find it hard to believe that the son of the sitting president, who was enriching himself, who the president aware of was going on, and even though he denied it, was not involved in corruption, but that he won't be, I find it hard to believe that he will be found guilty, because it leads right back to Joe Biden. And my other point was, Joe Biden's going around the world telling people he's standing up for democracies to oppose autocracies, and he himself was an autocrat. He himself ran a country with authoritarianism, replaced the attorney general with a person who wasn't even a lawyer. The guy that he replaced the attorney general, I'm using that term, of Ukraine with, wasn't even a lawyer at the time that that attorney general was investigating his son's company. It is absolutely one of the filthiest stories you've ever seen, but the media here is doing everything they can to try to brush over it.
Well, not here on the mother of all talk shows. Garland Nixon, thank you as always for joining us. Let's go back to the switchboard. Oh, how's the poll doing? Now that Sir Keir Starmer is 16 points behind Boris Johnson, should he A, resign? 40% of you think so. B, stay? 40% of you think so. Though some of you might be conservatives that really, really want him to stay because he's doing so badly. And 20% of you want him to be forced to go. So you can vote on that right up to the end of the show, more or less, on my Twitter feed. Let's take some calls. Jalal is in Manchester. Go ahead, Jalal.
Hello, George.
Sir, go ahead.
How are you?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you very much.
Good. Israel normally is getting 3.8 billion in aid or whatever it is, but yet they're asking for another billion.
Well, they've got a lot of rockets to replace the ones that killed all those people in Gaza.
It's taxpayers' money, and in my opinion, the one way to resolve a lot of this support, to depreciate the support, is the loudest mouthpiece is AIPAC. And I wonder what the US taxpayers would say when they found out that the loudest mouthpieces for AIPAC are the ones that pay the least tax in the whole country.
Well, I think the United States public is on the turn on this matter, led, I may say, by some of the bravest people on the planet who are American Jews, in Code Pink and in all kinds of organizations. Young American Jews are working extremely hard to change American public opinion. And of course, the Arab Americans are not small in number. And they too are mobilizing as never before. It's very difficult to do so in the United States. You run the ever-present risk of being criminalized and even imprisoned for doing so. But my good friend Abby Martin won a landmark legal case the other day in Georgia, where she was asked to sign that she would not support boycott, divestment and sanctions, or she would not be allowed to address a university audience there. She took that to court as unconstitutional, and she won her case. So things are definitely changing in America. But look, we've got a caller in Houston on the same subject. It's David. Let's see his point of view on it. David, welcome.
Thank you for taking this call, George.
Welcome, sir.
You know, yes, sir. Yes, sir. I got a little take on those Abraham Accords. It's not a educated version. You know, it's just coming from the Spirit. And you know, Abraham up there in heaven, he's been singing the blues a little bit. You know, he's not happy. He's close with the Father. You know what I'm saying? And he's been singing the blues a little bit. And Abraham, excuse me, I'm getting confused with all the uncles and brothers here. But anyway,
let's not go back too far. I always think it's a mistake to go back too far. God's not an estate agent after all.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Absolutely. What I was going to say is Isaac is taken to meet Enoch, and they're having some conversation, high-level meetings is what I would say, George. You know what I mean? And we're trying to lose the humor here. But anyway, of the two brothers and uncles, you know,
not to worry, David. Come back next week. Write it all out, and we'll get quicker to the point. I've just got so many callers. I can't go through the labyrinth of Isaac and Enoch and the rest. Simon's in London. Let's talk to him. Go ahead, Simon.
How you doing, George? Okay?
Yes, good, thanks.
That's good. Well, this morning it was great to learn that the South American country of, Central American country of El Salvador is thinking out of the box and could very soon be the first country in the world to adopt Bitcoin as an actual currency.
I heard that, yeah, as legal tender. It wouldn't be the only currency, but it would be legal tender, yeah.
Initially, it would run alongside the dollar, but based on my experience and based on historical fact, real currencies always rise to the top and dominate, just like gold did centuries ago, and it leads to the fall of empires. Of course, it could be a game changer. But my question to you was, in terms of Scotland, I know Scotland, the Scottish government, currently the SNP, have made every cringeworthy argument possible. They've failed miserably in terms of the argument of currency numerous times. But what would happen if Scotland actually adopted Bitcoin? Do you think that would change the, give the entire Scottish independence debate a new dimension?
No,
and give it a
Scotland, as El Salvador, has a certain ring to it, though. And it may be that after the Danish flirtation, the Norwegian flirtation, the Irish flirtation, we will get Scottish nationalist flirtation with El Salvador. But I really don't believe that pensioners in Scotland are going to settle for their pensions in Bitcoin. Simon, thanks for that call. Now, Sir Keir Starmer, 16 points behind. 42% of you want him to resign. 38% of you want him to stay. And 20% of you want him to be forced out. That's the poll. It's still running. Now, last question, I think, of the evening. In 1987, when she was re-elected for her third and final term, did Margaret Thatcher say she was A, raring to go, 2, seeking to unite, C, stronger than ever? The answer right after this break.
Radio Sputnik.
Let's take a call. Go ahead, Kenny.
Hi, George. Yeah, I just want to talk about the trans issue that you were speaking about earlier.
Yeah,
I've got
go
a book in front of me by Douglas Murray, and he's got a paragraph here that I'd just like to read out, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I was standing on the corner at a quarter.
All right, I'll get him off. He's a nutter. In the UK, it's 08081 965 522, and in the US, it's +1 844 944 3344.
Tough questions are the most powerful weapon we have. As long as you have questions, we'll keep asking. Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
So what did Mrs. Thatcher say when she was re-elected for the third term? A, raring to go, B, seeking to unite, or C, stronger than ever? The answer is raring to go. Perhaps she knew something then that the rest of us didn't, because not that long afterwards, she did, in fact, go, brought down by the poll tax. And I'm glad to say I had a small part in her downfall. Now, one man who would very much likely to have had her picture up on his bedroom wall, because he's that kind of a guy, was the irrepressible broadcaster and journalist, political commentator, one of my very favourite ones too, Patrick Christys. Patrick, welcome back on board.
Thank you very much. How did you know about my Margaret Thatcher picture, George?
Well, I knew someone that had been in your bedroom, but that is another story. Patrick,
yes.
First of all, are the champagne corks popping all over the royal estate at the new royal baby, or are they going to find out first what colour it is?
Yes, it's an interesting one, isn't it, really, this? Now, obviously, this is the news, of course, that Lilibet Diana, Mountbatten Windsor, has joined us. She joined the world on Friday. Meghan and Harry's choice of name has raised eyebrows. What they're saying is that potentially it's an opportunity to build bridges, a desire to build bridges with the royal family. Clearly, it's come after, well, a series of very explosive interviews, most of them involving Oprah, and clearly there's been a lot of issues there with regards to the royal family. You're right to point out the issue of colour, and that was one that was pointed out by Meghan Markle, where it was said that the royal family, or an unnamed member of the royal family, which of course then kind of tarnished the whole royal family really, did say apparently that there were questions raised about what colour Archie would be. Now, this was actually compounded earlier this week, by real kind of genuine proof of racism in the royal family, actually, that has emerged in the 1960s, where actually it was the royal family exempted themselves from equality law, and it meant that anyone who was in any way of colour, or as they called it, foreign immigrants into this country, was only able, and amongst the royal staff, to be a servant and could not rise any higher, and that was as recently as the 1960s. So, yeah,
it is quite embarrassing. They actually secured an exemption from the Race Relations Act, which is definitely not a good look. Although, I've got to say, my own family and Gayatri's family undoubtedly ruminated before our first was born on what it would look like, what its eyes would be like, what colour it would be. There's nothing actually essentially abnormal in wondering what the fruit of a mixed marriage will be. But that being as it may, Boris Johnson, now a happily married man, well, at least I hope so, they do say, Sir James Goldsmith famously said, when a man marries his mistress, he automatically creates a vacancy. Will Boris Johnson now keep it in his trousers?
Oh, well, I mean, you'd have to say that at no point during his life has he ever done that, so why would he start now, I suppose? But look, I suppose maybe it's a bit different now. He would not want to demean the office, the esteemed high office of British Prime Minister, by having kind of casual affairs. I mean, look, any way that you look at it now, Carrie is clearly... there must have been some conversations behind the scenes along the lines of, obviously when he was elected, he went off to Mustique, which in itself has caused lots of issues about who paid for that holiday. And he proposed to Carrie over there, and then now they've had their wedding. It's interesting, actually. There's been a series of Boris Johnson's former flings, and I believe one former wife and one former fiance, which says something about the fruity nature of his personal life, all kind of tripping over themselves now to basically say, good luck, Carrie, he's an absolute nightmare. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this one pans out, George.
Now, you say the esteemed office and all that. I don't know if you saw the Sunday Times story today. You must have seen the story about me, but I don't know if you read the story about Sir Brendan Bracken. Now, for the younger viewers, Brendan Bracken was Churchill's right-hand man, a very loyal supporter of Winston Churchill in the wilderness years when Churchill was agitating for Britain to stand up to Hitler as he grew more and more powerful and so on. In other words, one of the good eggs in the Conservative Party, was against appeasement, and who founded the Financial Times, no less, which headquarters is called Bracken House. Now, Bracken, it turns out, according to a powerful piece in the Sunday Times today, had a fetish for being caned, so powerful that he hired great country houses and turned them into temporary summer schools and got strapping sixth formers from the great public schools of the land and paid them to thrash him all day long. So there's dignity and there's dignity in high politics, isn't there?
Yeah, there very much is. Absolutely, it was a shocking story. Well, the thing is, actually, I suppose it's a depressing fact that it is a shocking story just by its nature, right? The whole element of this is quite a shocking thing. However, it's not unfortunately that necessarily that shocking that some conservative politicians in the past were into this kind of stuff. So this is the story, as you rightly said there, that he pretended to be a 16-year-old with a premature aging condition as well. So this guy's gone to extreme lengths to indulge in particular fantasy here. But it's a shame, really, isn't it, that on this day, because he was obviously Churchill's wartime Minister of Information, it's a shame, really, that on this day, the commemoration of D-Day, the 77-year anniversary of the D-Day landings in Normandy, that, actually there's some kind of the focus on Brendan Bracken's sexual fetishes. It's a bit of a shame, really. I think those two things have crossed paths at the same time.
It's a brilliant segue, and I was wondering how I could segue from what I've just said to what I wanted to ask you. It strikes me that given there can be hardly any survivors left from the D-Day landing, that the greatness of what happened on this day in 1944 has somewhat slipped down the batting order in the media.
Yeah, it has, actually. And I think it's a real shame on numerous counts, of course, because if you forget the true horrors of what happened that day in the wider context of the just horrific nature of World War II in general, then actually I think there's some risk or potential risk of things like that maybe happening again. And I think there's an accumulated wisdom that comes with people of a certain age and who have been through some lived experiences, such as the horrific D-Day landings. And if we ignore that, or if we push it down the pecking order when it comes to the news agenda, then I think we lose sight of it. And it's a shame, isn't it? Because there's an irony here. There wouldn't be a news agenda in the way that we know it if it wasn't for the people who landed and fought, and in some cases somebody died on the beaches in Normandy.
Many of them teenagers, Patrick.
Yeah, many of them teenagers, exactly, of course. And I think as well, it's fascinating for me that we're seeing now more and more things in this country, like school children wanting to tear down the Union Jack outside their schools and teachers indulging that. And I think, on the 77th anniversary of one of Britain's greatest military operations, I think, it was poignant to remember that we wouldn't have the opportunity to shout at our own flag now if it wasn't for some of those people who made the ultimate sacrifice.
A point very well made. Here's a couple of calls for you and indeed for both of us. Graham is in Ayrshire. He's up first. Graham, go ahead.
Good evening, George. Good evening to you as well, Patrick. I joined in just when Ranjeet was talking, and he was talking about how he would probably support the easing of restrictions at the moment. I wanted to take a different tone on that, if that's all right.
Sure, go ahead.
That heavy as I build my case. But Ranjeet's rationale was that the link between cases and deaths of COVID-19 has been broken, and that's obviously because older adults, which is the group that's most at risk, are fully or mostly vaccinated now. Now, I don't know that that's conclusive, but I'm willing to go along with that for the moment. But what I did want to raise is, why is no one talking about long COVID? It seems like death is the only metric that anyone's using, and I noticed that's what Ranjeet was referring to as well. But long COVID, and by that I'm talking about a cluster of symptoms that people get post-infection. That can include cognitive impairment, including your memory, shortness of breath, chronic pain, gastrointestinal problems, wide range of symptoms. And there was some research that came out in the past week or so that told us that 1 million people in Britain have experienced symptoms of long COVID, and of those, 365,000 have reported symptoms after 12 months. So those people might never get better. And
well, look, I need to cut that short, but it's a fascinating call, Graham. But because of the hour and the sheer number of people trying to get through, I don't have the expertise to answer that. I don't expect, though I could be wrong, that Patrick does either. But the long COVID issue, just like ME, Patrick, perhaps a little before your time, might very well become a long-running neuralgic point in British discourse.
Absolutely, 100%. There's so much about this virus that we don't know yet, and it's just simply by the nature of how long it's been around and how long we've been doing tests on it. And it's a similar thing as well when it comes to the vaccinations now. You know, we are hearing here now about 75% of adults being jabbed, 50% of people being double jabbed, and it's seeming to be perfectly effective against all the known variants so far. In fact, this week we were apparently terrified of the Nepalese variant. The World Health Organization came out and said they don't even think that one exists. Although, to be fair, in January they also said, the January before last, they also said that they didn't think there was any human-to-human transmission of the coronavirus. So they're not always right. You know, I think there's a lot that we don't know, and there's a lot of information that we need to get over the course of you know, the coming months and indeed possibly years as well. And a lot of that does centre around the vaccine as well, as it now is getting to the point where we're looking to start vaccinating essentially children. The Pfizer vaccine this week was passed for use amongst 12 to 15-year-olds. This is one of the big questions now, isn't it? Which is, yes, it all seems totally safe so far, and pretty much anyway, and that's great. But we don't have a lot of the long-term data yet, both on this virus and on the vaccine. And so it can be a bit tricky as to whether or not we now start putting it in kids' arms, really.
Just before I go to Sean in Stevenage, Patrick, you must have been delighted to see the sepulchral figure of Tony Blair back on our screens. He seems to be calling the shots in the Labour Party, but perhaps in the Conservative Party too.
It's a damning indictment of where the Labour Party is at the moment, that Tony Blair is still seen as a credible potential leading force in there. I think it's absolutely astonishing that both him and Alistair Campbell actually have any kind of say whatsoever on British politics, and why there's not repeated and frankly relentless questions based around their moral compass and what went on in the Middle East. The only way, I've said it before, I'll say it again, the only way I would like to see Tony Blair back in frontline politics is if we could then drag him back and make him account for some of the horrors, frankly, of the things that he's been responsible for. Yeah, it is the fact that Tony Blair now is relentlessly sticking his oar in. I think the fact is that he's really probably the most successful leader of the Labour Party, certainly in recent times anyway. And he is potentially at a time when the Labour Party actually just does not seem to be producing anyone who seems like they could win a general election. Tony Blair's won 3 of them. I can understand now why people are getting more attuned to the idea of a Blair return. It's that trade-off. Are you willing to accept Blair just in order for the Labour Party to potentially win a general election again? And I suppose only Labour Party members will know the answer to that.
Well, speaking as the leader of a rival party, I'd be delighted if Mr. Blair did come back as the leader of the Labour Party. Although, as I said earlier, there seems little reason for him to do so, because he controls what happens in the Labour Party without having to register his interests in the House of Commons. Let's hear from Sean in Stevenage. Go ahead, Sean.
Hey up, George. How you doing?
By the grace of God, I'm great, fighting fit. Thank you.
Good. Very interesting to see Dr. Brar back on. I was surprised and pleased, and it's good to see him. I like his comments.
Yeah.
I got a couple of quick observations here, and it's interesting what Patrick was just saying about the data and extending out the vaccine to younger age groups. We all know, and we've discussed the levels of corruption this government has been up to during this COVID crisis, where they've had their hands in the till and they've been taking advantage.
By the way, I'll let you go on, Sean, but the SNP government are revealed in Scotland in today's newspapers to have been doing exactly the same thing, giving out hundreds of millions of pounds worth of contracts to businesses sympathetic to the SNP without any due process. Go ahead, Sean.
Is there nobody honest anymore?
Yeah, me and Patrick could form a coalition of all the talents. Sean, thanks for calling. Patrick, there will be a reckoning, of course, on the, as Dominic Cummings made the point, there seems no reason why the public inquiry into what happened in total in the pandemic should not begin immediately. It's been kicked down the road to next year, but next year will soon be here. And there's going to be perhaps unforeseen circumstances or consequences, rather, to how it's all been handled, including the point that was just made there about how the money was handed over.
Absolutely, yeah, and that the kind of jobs for the boys nature of the Conservative Party's approach to dishing out contracts at the start of this pandemic and indeed throughout, including someone who used to live next door to Matt Hancock and owned his favourite pub, and that's one of many, frankly, is deeply questionable. There are also, of course, massive issues in relation to the care home scandal that happened there, and that is a proper out-and-out scandal that undoubtedly and unequivocally cost potentially thousands of lives, where we're sending people back into care homes knowingly with coronavirus and let it just rip through that particular part of our society. So, I mean, at the minimum that has to happen there eventually is that Matt Hancock will go at some point because of that, I would imagine. The question is, I think it's going to be a really interesting one, this, for a study of the British political psyche, really, about let's just say our vaccine rollout continues and continues to be magnificent, and there's no reason to believe that that won't. And let's just say then that we get out of the big coffee sneezy woods of coronavirus pretty soon. Once all that's done, is the public appetite for this now going to be, let's just never talk about this again, I'm sick and tired of it? Or are they going to be demanding for Boris Johnson's head? And I suspect that it might be the former one. I think that Boris Johnson might actually not come out of it too badly. Also, you do have to look at it and go...
Well, that's what happened with Blair and Chilcot.
Yeah.
If you think about it, Chilcot, we waited years for Chilcot, and it was no sooner launched than it was forgotten.
Yeah, exactly that, and I think people will want to just move on. There are question marks, serious question marks, though, anyway, about how long Boris Johnson wants to continue to be Prime Minister. And so whether or not that is something, let's just fast forward and say we start this report in a year and it takes about a year. Well, that's quite a long way in political terms down the line. Does Boris Johnson decide that he particularly wants to carry on after that anyway, Certainly if his own personal finances are anything to go by, then potentially not. I mean, Carrie, bless her, had to rent her wedding dress, didn't she? So potentially he could go back to writing articles that Telegraph for £250,000. Maybe that starts to look more appealing.
I'm drying my eyes here, Patrick, at the poverty you describe. Thank you very much indeed. It's been an absolute pleasure. It always is. Patrick Christys, thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. I cut Patrick short only because I had the chance to go to Nassau, and who wouldn't? It's Mike in Nassau. Go ahead, Mike.
Hey, how are you?
By the grace of God, I'm good. I wish I was in Nassau, but go ahead.
Yeah, you'd like it here today. It's 30 degrees and sunny. Okay, I have to think about these anti-vaxxers, especially in the UK. I think if someone refuses to take the coronavirus vaccine and gets sick, then they should pick up the tab for their medical care. Why should the NHS pick up the tab for someone who got ill, and then essentially it was their choice not to take the vaccine?
Well, choice is the
if they're
key word,
willing
isn't it?
to do it, they should. No, why you could cost hundreds of thousands of pounds to care for someone just because they decided not to take the vaccine. You think that's fair? Don't we have an obligation to lower the cost on the NHS? You have obligation to other people besides your own health.
Yeah, I'm a supporter of the vaccination program.
I just got my second shot on Monday.
What did you get? Which one?
AstraZeneca, that's the one they're giving here.
I got Pfizer. I've had 2 Pfizers. I wanted the Sputnik 5. I was going to take it in this studio live on air, but that proved impossible to arrange. But I've had the 2 jabs. I have had no bad reaction at all.
Me either, none at all.
Well, let's hope it continues that way and is that way for other people too. Mike, thanks for the call. I've got to go to New York, where Samuel awaits. Go ahead, Samuel.
Hello, George. How are you?
By the grace of God, I'm good. Thank you.
Yes. I have what I believe is a very good question. Comandante Fidel Castro is also one of my favorite, if not my favorite person in history. We have that amazing fact in common, you and me. I was wondering if you could tell me, I have 2 things. Can you tell me, you said that you met him for many times. Can you tell me about your first meeting with Comandante Fidel Castro? And can you also tell me, what do you think, having been in South Africa as an agent when Mandela was in prison, what do you think African Americans would feel if they knew more about the Angolan struggle and the Cuban role there?
These are very big and very good questions. If you leave your address with my colleagues on the switchboard, I'll send you a copy of my biography of Fidel Castro, which answers all of your questions, actually. But I don't have time, alas, to give it justice this evening. Fidel Castro is largely demonized in the United States. I don't believe that he has the support now amongst African Americans that he did when he first went to the United States as the leader of the Cuban government for the United Nations, where a totally remarkable chain of events occurred, which culminated in Fidel Castro throwing a picnic to thank Malcolm X in Central Park for Malcolm being so hospitable to the Cuban delegation, who'd been effectively forced out of their Madison Avenue hotel, and put Fidel and Che and the others up in the Teresa Hotel in Harlem. It's one of the most fascinating anecdotes of many hundreds of anecdotes that Fidel Castro told to me. I was indeed extremely lucky is not the word, privileged is the word, to spend hundreds of hours in the company of Fidel Castro. And if you leave your address, I promise I'll send you a book. But I have to tell you one or two things just before I close. Today, as I said, is a very special day for my YouTube channel. We hit 100,000 subscribers. And I want to thank everyone who has subscribed to my channel, not just now, but for many, many years past. So the longer you've been a subscriber, the more heartily I'm thanking you this evening. It's a major milestone to get to 100,000. I need to tell you also that you can listen to a podcast version of the show. It's brand new and available wherever you get your podcasts. Just search The Mother of All Talk Shows. It's on Spotify, Deezer, Google, Apple Podcasts, and many others. Listened to in over 22 countries so far. If you're like me and you don't know what a podcast is, it's basically a compressed version of this show, half the length, all the ads and breaks and hiccups taken out. So it's the quintessential version of the mother of all talk shows. So I commend it to the house, as they say. I've got time just for one more. Jared in Pennsylvania on COVID-19. Be quick, Jared.
Hello, George. Let's talk to you again. COVID-19. I think we're finally moving out of the worst of the pandemic. But the real question is, have we learned anything from it? And it doesn't seem that America or Great Britain really have. I mean, you look at places like China or Vietnam, they're just rolling on ahead as basically the West has just really adopted a lot of this, libertarian free market, like we got to open up, everything is all good and like that. But I don't really see any push for like win-win cooperation or any kind of universal worldwide healthcare system.
No, absolutely. No lessons are likely to be learned, although everyone will say lessons have to be learned. The reality is when these things happen, lessons are not learned because lessons learned are expensive. You have to take action on the lessons that you learned. You'd have to, for example, make sure that you had a health service that was capable of standing up to a pandemic. And we don't, and you certainly don't. You'd have to work out how the virus has so disastrously affected the people in the poorest communities, the people that were living in the most overcrowded conditions, the people that had no garden to sit out in, the people that were cooped up in small apartments with big families, you'd have to draw a lot of expensive conclusions if you did. China has not just bounced back. China is powering forward, growing at a faster rate than any other country in the world, having been the place where the virus seems to have originated, and yet they dealt with it better than anyone else in the world. And you might think that that is a lesson that all of us might draw upon. I certainly reflect upon it. I don't want to be Chinese or to be in China, but I wouldn't mind a government that could deal with a pandemic as powerfully, quickly as they did.